What if Daenerys Targaryen landed in the north instead of Dragonstone? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The storm comes from the narrow sea, like the wrath of the drowned god himself. Black clouds swallow the horizon as Daenerys Targaryen's fleet fights against winds that howl like the spirits of the damned. Her flagship groans beneath massive waves that crash over the deck, sending Dothraki warriors scrambling for handholds, while unsullied maintain their formation despite the chaos. Tyrion Lannister grips the ship's railing, his knuckles white as he watches the dragon struggle against the tempest. Drogon's wings beat furiously against wind gusts that threaten to dash him against the masts, while Rhaegal and Viserion cry out in distress as they're blown further north than any Targaryen dragon has flown in 3 centuries. "Your Grace!" Grey Worm shouts over the storm, seawater streaming down his face. "The fleet is scattering. We cannot hold this course." Daenerys stands at the bow, silver hair whipping in the wind, her violet eyes fixed on her struggling children. Every instinct tells her to turn south, to fight toward the safety of Dragonstone. But the storm has other plans. The winds drive them north with relentless fury, toward shores she never intended to see. "We go where the storm takes us," she declares, her voice carrying over the wind. "The dragons will follow." Meanwhile, 50 leagues north of White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderly's outriders patrol the coastal roads, as they have for months. The North has grown vigilant since Jon Snow claimed the crown, and every strange sail on the horizon demands investigation. But Sir Marlon Manderly has never seen anything like the shapes that emerge from the storm clouds. Dragons, 3 of them, wings spread wide as they fight the wind, their cries echoing across the grey waters. Behind them, the dark shapes of foreign ships appear through the rain, their black sails torn but still driving them toward the rocky shore. Marlon spurs his horse toward White Harbor, his heart hammering against his ribs. In all his years serving House Manderly, he has never carried news like this. Dragons have returned to Westeros, and they're flying toward northern shores. The Great Hall of Winterfell buzzes with the quiet efficiency of a kingdom at work. Jon Snow sits in the high seat that once belonged to his father, reading reports from the Night's Watch, while Sansa Stark manages the steady stream of northern lords seeking audience. The weight of the crown sits heavy on his shoulders, but Jon has learned to carry it. Maester Vulcan enters the hall with quick steps, his face pale beneath his grey robes. In his hands, he carries a raven's message bearing the seal of House Manderly. "Your Grace," Vulcan says, bowing low. Urgent word from White Harbor. Jon takes the scroll, noting how Vulcan's hands tremble slightly. The message is brief, written in haste, but its content makes Jon's blood run cold. Dragons sighted off the coast, foreign fleet making landfall, Targaryen banners confirmed, request immediate instructions. Jon reads the message twice before the words fully register. Sansa moves to his side, her blue eyes scanning the parchment over his shoulder. "Dragons," she whispers, and the word seems to echo through the hall. The great lords of the north fall silent. Lord Rose Karstark stops mid-sentence in his petition. Lady Lyanna Mormont's young voice cuts through the quiet like a blade. "The last dragons died out more than a century past," she says, but her voice lacks its usual certainty. Jon stands slowly, the weight of kingship pressing down like a mountain. Every eye in the hall turns to him, waiting for words that might make sense of the impossible. "Summon the lords," Jon says quietly. "All of them. And send ravens to the Night's Watch. If dragons have returned to Westeros, we need to know why." Near the shore where the Manderly ships dock, Daenerys Targaryen surveys the damage to her fleet. 6 ships lost to the storm, including 2 carrying crucial supplies. Her remaining vessels sit anchored in unfamiliar waters, while her dragons circle overhead like great shadows against the grey sky. The beach stretches empty before them, but Tyrion points toward the distant banners approaching from the south. White Harbour's forces ride hard, and behind them the smoking chimneys of the northern port city rise like fingers of stone. "We're a long way from Dragonstone, Your Grace," Tyrion observes, his dry humour intact despite their circumstances. Daenerys nods, her eyes tracking Drogon's flight path as he lands on the beach nearby. The great black dragon shakes seawater from his wings and fixes his red eyes on the approaching northern riders. "The storm brought us here for a reason," she says, though uncertainty colours her voice. "Perhaps the gods wanted us to meet the north before we claim the south." Varys appears at her elbow, his soft shoes making no sound on the wet sand. The Master of Whisperers has managed to keep his robes dry, despite the chaos, and his expression reveals nothing of his thoughts. "The North remembers, Your Grace," Varys says quietly. "They remember your father. They remember what Targaryens have done to Starks." Daenerys turns her violet gaze toward the approaching banners. House Manderly's merman flies beside the grey direwolf of House Stark, and she knows that word of her arrival will reach Winterfell within hours. "Then we must give them new memories," she replies, her voice carrying the steel of dragons. "Better ones." Missandei steps forward, her brown eyes concerned as she watches the northern cavalry approach. The former slave knows the look of armies preparing for war, and these northerners ride with hands close to their weapons. "Your Grace, should we prepare for battle?" Missandei asks. Daenerys considers the question, watching as Grey Worm forms up the Unsullied in defensive lines along the beach. The temptation to show strength burns in her chest like dragon fire. But she thinks of Tyrion's words, of Varys's warnings, of the impossible storm that brought them here. "No," she says finally. "We came to Westeros to rule, not to conquer. If we start with fire and blood in the north, we'll never win their hearts." The Manderly riders slow as they approach, their horses skittish around the dragons. Sir Marlon raises his hand in greeting, though his sword stays loose in its sheath. Behind him, 24 northern knights form a watchful line. "I am Sir Marlon Manderly, sworn to House Stark and the King in the north," he calls out, his voice carrying across the beach. "By whose authority do you land on northern shores?" Daenerys steps forward, her bearing regal despite the salt stains on her travel cloak. 3 dragons perch behind her like living mountains, their eyes fixed on the mounted northerners. "I am Daenerys of House Targaryen," she declares, her voice clear and strong. "Rightful Queen of the 7 Kingdoms, the storm drove us here, and we claim the ancient right of shelter." Sir Marlon's eyes widen. Every northern lord knows the stories of dragons, of Targaryens, of fire made flesh. But seeing them here on northern soil transforms legend into terrifying reality. "The north belongs to Jon Snow, King in the north," Marlon replies carefully. "Any who would claim shelter here must answer to him." Tyrion steps beside his queen, offering his most diplomatic smile. The dwarf's reputation precedes him even here, and several of the northern knights recognize the golden hair and mismatched eyes. "We seek no quarrel with King Jon," Tyrion says smoothly. "Only safe harbor while we repair our ships. Surely the north has room for unexpected guests." The dragons shift restlessly, sensing the tension in the air. Drogon raises his great head and releases a low rumble that makes the northern horses dance with fear. But Daenerys places a hand on his flank, and the black dragon settles. "We will wait for word from your king," Daenerys says, her violet eyes meeting Sir Marlon's. "But know this, we did not come here as enemies. The storm brought us to the north, and perhaps there is wisdom in that. As ravens fly south from White Harbor, bearing impossible news, and as Jon Snow prepares to face a test no king in the north has faced in 300 years, the wheels of fate begin turning toward a future no one could have foreseen. Dragons have come to the north, not as conquerors but as refugees, and in that simple twist of wind and weather, the destiny of Westeros begins to change. The great hall of Winterfell echoes with heated voices as northern lords debate the impossible. Jon Snow sits in the high seat, listening to arguments that grow more desperate with each passing hour. Outside the ancient walls, snow falls in thick flakes that muffle the sound of ravens coming and going. "Dragons, your grace," Lord Roose Karstark says, his voice tight with old fears. "The last time dragons flew over the north, they burned Harrenhal to ash. We cannot trust them." Lady Lyanna Mormont stands on her chair to be seen over the table. Her young voice cuts through the murmur like steel. The Targaryens conquered the Seven Kingdoms with fire and blood. Why should we believe this one comes in peace? Jon raises his hand for silence, and the hall gradually quiets. The weight of kingship has never felt heavier than it does now, with 3 dragons roosting somewhere near White Harbor and their queen waiting for his response. "Because," Jon says quietly, "she could have burned White Harbor already if conquest was her goal. Instead, she asks for shelter." Sansa Stark moves beside his chair, her blue eyes troubled as she studies the map spread across the table. Red markers show the positions of Daenerys' fleet, while black pins mark the last known sightings of White Walker activity beyond the wall. "The timing troubles me," Sansa says carefully. "Why now? Why here? What does she truly want from the north?" Before Jon can answer, the great doors swing open. Maester Vulcan hurries into the hall, his face pale with urgency. Behind him walks a figure that makes every person in the room fall silent. Bran Stark rolls his wheelchair forward, his dark eyes distant and strange. The three-eyed raven has been absent from Winterfell for weeks, lost in visions that stretch across time and space. But now he has returned, and the look on his face sends ice through Jon's veins. "The dead march," Bran says, his voice flat and emotionless. "They will reach the wall within the fortnight. The Night King has grown stronger. His army numbers in the hundreds of thousands." The hall erupts in shouts and curses. Some lords call for immediate mobilization, while others demand to know why Bran waited to share this news. But Jon's attention fixes on his brother's empty stare. "You've seen something else," Jon says quietly. "Haven't you?" Bran nods slowly. "Fire and ice must unite, or all will fall to darkness. The Dragon Queen's arrival is not chance. It is necessity." Meanwhile, on the shores near White Harbor, Daenerys Targaryen paces the length of her makeshift camp. Dothraki warriors tend their horses, while Unsullied maintain their weapons. But all eyes frequently turn skyward, where 3 dragons circle in the grey afternoon light. Tyrion Lannister approaches, with wine salvaged from the wreckage, offering a cup to his queen. The storm cost them much, but some luxuries survived the journey from across the narrow sea. "Brooding suits you poorly, your grace," Tyrion observes, settling onto a piece of driftwood. "Though I admit the circumstances give good reason for it." Daenerys accepts the wine, but does not drink. Her violet eyes track Drogon's flight pattern as he sweeps low over the waves, his great wings casting shadows on the water. "I came to reclaim my birthright," she says, her voice barely audible over the crash of waves. "Instead, I find myself stranded in a foreign land, dependent on the mercy of a bastard king." Tyrion's eyebrows rise at her choice of words. "Jon Snow may be a bastard by birth, but he's proven himself a capable leader. The North follows him because he earned their loyalty, not because he inherited it. Varys emerges from behind a supply tent, his soft shoes making no sound on the sand. The Master of Whisperers has spent the morning coordinating with his network of contacts, gathering intelligence on their unexpected situation. "The king in the north rides toward us," Varys reports quietly. "A small party, perhaps 20 men. He comes under a banner of parley, not war." Daenerys turns sharply, her silver hair catching the weak sunlight. "He comes personally." "So it appears. Either he's very brave or very foolish." Grey Worm approaches with measured steps, his bronze armor gleaming despite the grey day. The unsullied commander's face shows no emotion, but his hand rests near his sword. "Your Grace, if this is a trap—" "It's not," Daenerys interrupts, though she's not entirely certain. Something in the reports of this northern king intrigues her. A bastard who rose to become king in the north through merit alone. A man who holds the loyalty of lords who could easily turn against him. "Prepare an honor guard," she commands. "We meet him as equals, not as supplicants." An hour later, Jon Snow rides across the sand with a small escort of northern knights. The king in the north wears simple leather and mail beneath a grey cloak, his bastard sword, Long Claw, hanging at his side. Behind him ride Sir Davos Seaworth and several lords Jon trusts with his life. Daenerys waits near the waterline, flanked by Tyrion and Missandei. Grey Worm stands at attention, with a dozen unsullied, while overhead Drogon circles like a great black thundercloud. Jon dismounts 20 paces away and walks forward, his dark eyes taking in the dragons, the foreign soldiers, and the silver-haired queen who commands them all. This close, Daenerys can see the weight he carries, the same burden of leadership that presses down on her own shoulders. "Your Grace," Jon says, inclining his head slightly. "I am Jon Snow, king in the north." Daenerys studies him carefully. He's younger than she expected, but his eyes hold depths that speak of hard experience. When he looks at her, she sees neither fear nor dismissal, only careful assessment. "Your Grace," she replies, matching his formality. "I am Daenerys of House Targaryen. I thank you for agreeing to meet." Tyrion steps forward with his most diplomatic smile. "Jon Snow, I've heard much about you. They say you united the North through honor rather than fear. A rare achievement in these times." Jon's expression shifts as he recognizes the dwarf. "Tyrion Lannister, I remember you from Winterfell years ago. You've traveled far from home." "Home is wherever my queen commands," Tyrion replies smoothly. "Though I admit, the North was not in our original plans." Sir Davos clears his throat and moves to Jon's side. The old knight's weathered face shows the wariness of a man who has seen too many battles. "Your Grace," Davos addresses Daenerys. "His Grace Jon Snow offers the hospitality of the North, but we must speak plainly about your intentions here." Daenerys nods, appreciating the direct approach. "The storm drove us here, but perhaps there is purpose in that. The North faces a threat that concerns us all." Jon's eyes sharpen. "You speak of the dead beyond the wall." "I speak of survival," Daenerys replies, her voice gaining strength. "My advisor tells me you've seen them yourself. The army that cannot die." Above them, Drogon releases a long cry that echoes across the water. The great dragon descends, landing heavily on the beach behind his mother. Several northern horses shy away from the massive creature, but Jon's mount holds steady. "I've seen them," Jon confirms, his voice grim. "They're coming south, and when they do, it won't matter who sits on the Iron Throne. The dead don't care about politics." Tyrion exchanges a meaningful look with Daenerys. This is the opening they need. Common ground built on shared danger rather than competing claims. "Then perhaps we can help each other," Daenerys says carefully. "My dragons breathe fire. Your people know the North. Together we might stand a chance." Jon considers her words, while Drogon settles behind her like a living mountain. The dragon's red eyes fix on the Northern King, but the great beast makes no aggressive moves. The North has stood alone for thousands of years, Jon says, finally. We've learned to mistrust Southern promises. I'm not offering promises, Daenerys replies, stepping closer. I'm offering dragons. The words hang in the cold air between them. Jon looks into her violet eyes and sees something he recognizes: the loneliness of command, the burden of protecting people who depend on your choices. The Lords of the North will need convincing, Jon says quietly. They remember what Targaryens did to Starks. Daenerys nods slowly. Then let me earn their trust. My ships need repairs, and my people need food and shelter. In exchange, I offer my dragons against the dead when they come. Tyrion smiles, recognizing the delicate dance of diplomacy taking shape. A temporary alliance, Your Grace. Nothing that compromises either party's ultimate goals. Jon looks back toward his own men, seeing the skepticism in their faces. Lord Karstark's hand rests on his sword, while Ser Davos watches the exchange with sharp eyes. But Jon also remembers Bran's words. Fire and ice must unite. You may bring your people to Winterfell, Jon decides. As guests, not conquerors. Your dragons will be welcome to roost in our godswood, if they can bear the cold. Daenerys feels something inside her chest loosen. Relief she didn't know she was holding. Thank you, Your Grace. You won't regret this decision. As the two rulers shake hands on the agreement, neither realizes they are setting in motion events that will reshape the Seven Kingdoms. Behind them, Drogon spreads his wings and releases another cry, as if announcing that dragons have come to the north, not as enemies, but as allies against the darkness that approaches from beyond the wall. The sun breaks through the clouds for the first time since the storm, casting long shadows across the beach where two monarchs have just forged the most unlikely alliance in the history of Westeros. The ancient godswood of Winterfell has never seen anything like the construction that begins at dawn. Northern carpenters work alongside unsullied engineers, building massive shelters beneath the heart tree, while 3 dragons watch from the branches above. Drogon perches on the thickest limb like some great black raven, his weight making the ancient wood creak ominously. Jon Snow stands beside the red-leafed weirwood, watching his people adapt to the impossible. Master Builder Mikken directs the construction with nervous glances toward Rhaegal, who has claimed a section of the godswood as his own territory. The golden dragon's breath creates small clouds of steam in the cold air, melting snow wherever he exhales. The heart tree has stood for 1,000 years, Mikken says, wiping sweat from his brow despite the winter chill. I pray the dragons don't decide it needs reshaping. Daenerys approaches through the falling snow, her silver hair stark against the grey sky. She moves with quiet grace between the construction workers, pausing to examine the dragon shelters taking shape. The structures blend northern stonework with Essosi engineering principles that Tyrion sketched from memory. They're magnificent, she says, joining Jon beneath the heart tree. Your people work with skill I've rarely seen. Jon nods, watching a team of northern smiths forge iron brackets under Grey Worm's direction. The Unsullied commander demonstrates metalworking techniques learned in Slaver's Bay, while the northerners share methods for working cold iron that won't shatter in winter. They're trying their best, Jon replies, though I'm not sure anyone truly knows how to house dragons. Above them, Viserion descends from the sky with a rush of wings, landing heavily near the newest shelter. The cream-colored dragon sniffs at the stone and timber construction before settling inside with a satisfied rumble. Snow begins melting around his massive form, creating puddles of slush that freeze again in minutes. Meanwhile, in Winterfell's Great Hall, Sansa Stark spreads ledgers across the high table, while Missandei reviews supply manifests written in multiple languages. The logistics of feeding and housing 2 armies through a northern winter would challenge even the most experienced steward. The grain stores will last until spring if we ration carefully, Sansa explains, her finger tracing columns of numbers. But your people eat differently than northerners. Rice, figs, olive oil, we have none of these things. Missandei nods, her brown eyes studying the unfamiliar accounting methods. The Dothraki require mare's milk and fermented drinks. The Unsullied need little, but what they do eat must be precisely measured. Perhaps we can adapt. Through the great hall's windows, they watch Dothraki warriors attempting to tend their horses in the stable yard. The fierce riders struggle with northern customs, their traditional methods clashing with Winterfell's established routines. Several heated arguments break out before Ser Rodrik intervenes with patient explanations. Your horse lords are proud, Sansa observes. They don't take instruction easily. Pride kept them alive on the Dothraki Sea, Missandei replies diplomatically. But pride alone won't survive a northern winter. A commotion outside draws their attention. In the courtyard, a group of Dothraki warriors has gathered around the blacksmith's forge, fascinated by the process of reshaping their curved blades for northern combat. The smith works with nervous efficiency, under their watchful eyes, adapting araks for fighting in heavy armor rather than open plains. Sansa and Missandei exchange a look of understanding. Both women know the delicate work of managing strong-willed people, though their methods differ greatly. We'll need to create new routines, Sansa says finally. Your people and mine, working together instead of simply coexisting. Agreed, Missandei replies, though it will require patience from both sides. In the training yard, steel rings against steel as Grey Worm demonstrates unsullied spear techniques to a group of northern soldiers. The unsullied commander moves with mechanical precision, his bronze-tipped spear flowing through defensive patterns that emphasize formation, fighting over individual glory. Lock shields, Grey Worm commands, his accented common tongue clear despite the cold. The dead fight without fear. You must fight without doubt. Ser Rodrik watches the training with approving eyes. The old master-at-arms has seen enough warfare to recognize effective techniques, regardless of their origin. Beside him, several northern knights practice the disciplined movements that have made the Unsullied legendary. Your commander knows his business, Rodrik tells Tyrion, who observes the training while sipping wine from a heated cup. Grey Worm has never lost a battle, Tyrion replies, though he's never fought in snow before today. The northern soldiers struggle with the foreign techniques at first, their individualistic fighting style clashing with the Unsullied emphasis on unit cohesion. But gradually, patterns emerge. Northern creativity adapts Essosi discipline, while Unsullied precision incorporates northern flexibility. Young Lord Umber stumbles during a spear drill, his feet slipping on the icy ground. Grey Worm steadies him with a brief nod, then demonstrates how to maintain balance in winter conditions. The exchange passes without words, but mutual respect flickers between them. Meanwhile, in the depths of Winterfell's crypts, Varys moves like a ghost between ancient tombs. The Master of Whisperers has spent days exploring the castle's hidden passages, establishing secure locations for his network of informants. His soft shoes make no sound on the stone floors as he examines alcoves that could hide messages. A small bird lands on the crypt window, one of Varys's little birds, arriving with intelligence from beyond the wall. The spider reads the message by candlelight, his expression growing troubled as he deciphers the coded words. The dead march in greater numbers than anyone suspected. White Walker scouts probe the wall's defenses, seeking weak points. And something else. Reports of ice spiders large as hounds, and worse things moving in the darkness. Varys burns the message and begins composing his own coded responses. The Game of Thrones continues even in the face of extinction, and information remains the most valuable currency in Westeros. As evening falls over Winterfell, Jon Snow finds himself standing atop the battlements, looking north toward the wall that has protected the realm for 8,000 years. The weight of responsibility presses down like the cold itself, heavier with each passing day. "You carry it well," Daenerys says, joining him at the parapet. She wraps her cloak tighter against the biting wind, but her violet eyes remain fixed on his face. "Carry what?" Jon asks, though he already knows. "The crown, the burden, the knowledge that thousands of people depend on your choices." Jon turns to study her profile in the torchlight. This close, he can see the exhaustion she hides behind royal bearing, the loneliness that comes with absolute authority. "It's harder than I expected," Jon admits. "Growing up, I dreamed of being worthy of my father's name. I never imagined I'd need to surpass it." Daenerys nods slowly. "I dreamed of coming home to Westeros since I was old enough to understand what home meant. I imagined the people welcoming their lost princess with celebration and joy. Instead, you found storms and skeptical lords." "Instead, I found something I didn't expect," she corrects. "Purpose beyond conquest. A war worth fighting that has nothing to do with thrones or crowns." They stand in comfortable silence, two young rulers sharing the weight of kingdoms. Below them, Winterfell bustles with activity as northerners and foreigners work together to prepare for the darkness approaching from the north. "Your dragons," Jon says eventually. "How do you command them? How do you live with that much power at your word?" Daenerys considers the question carefully. "I don't command them, not truly. They're my children, not my weapons. When we fight together, it's because we choose to, not because I force them. The lords of the north fear them," Jon says, quietly. "They remember stories of Harrenhal, of the Field of Fire." "Fear can be useful," Daenerys replies, "but it's not enough. Your people need to see that dragons can protect as well as destroy." As if summoned by her words, Drogon's shadow passes overhead. The great black dragon circles the castle twice before landing in the Godswood, his arrival marked by the sound of settling stone and timber as the new shelters accommodate his weight. "He likes it here," Daenerys observes with surprise. "The cold doesn't bother him as much as I feared." "Dragons are fire-made flesh," Jon says, remembering old stories from the nursery. "But maybe fire burns brighter in the cold." Daenerys looks at him sharply, struck by something in his words. For a moment, she sees not just the king in the north, but the man beneath the crown, someone who understands loss and responsibility, who carries secrets and burdens with quiet strength. "Fire and ice," she murmurs, almost to herself. "What?" "Something Bran said when we arrived, about fire and ice needing to unite." She turns to face him fully. "I think I'm beginning to understand what he meant." The wind picks up, carrying snow across the battlements and the sound of dragons settling for the night. Below them, Winterfell prepares for sleep under the protection of both direwolves and dragons, an alliance that would have seemed impossible mere days before. Neither Jon nor Daenerys speaks of what they both feel building between them, something deeper than political necessity, warmer than mutual respect. Instead, they stand together on the ancient walls, watching the north prepare for war, while dragons roost in the Godswood like great guardian spirits. For the first time since the storm brought her to these shores, Daenerys Targaryen feels something she hasn't experienced since childhood, the sense of coming home. The raven arrives at Winterfell just after dawn, its black wings heavy with ice from the long flight south. Maester Vulcan breaks the seal with trembling fingers, his face growing pale as he reads the desperate message scrawled in haste. "Last hearth burns. The dead walk among us. Send help if you can. If not, remember us." Jon Snow stands in the great hall as lords gather around the high table, their faces grim in the grey morning light. The message passes between them like a death sentence, each man understanding what it means. The war they've prepared for has begun. "How many men can we muster quickly?" Jon asks, his voice cutting through the murmur of worried voices. 2,000 horse, perhaps more on foot, Lord Karstark replies. But the ride to Last Hearth is hard, especially in this snow. Daenerys enters the hall with Tyrion at her side, her silver hair still damp from the morning wash. One look at the assembled faces tells her everything she needs to know. The attack has begun, she states rather than asks. Jon nods grimly. Last Hearth, House Umber's seat. If the dead have taken it, they're moving faster than we expected. Grey Worm appears in the doorway, his bronze armor gleaming despite the dim light. Behind him, a dozen Unsullied stand, ready for orders, their spears held at attention. Your Grace, Grey Worm addresses Daenerys. The men are ready. Dothraki and Unsullied both await your command. Tyrion steps forward, his expression troubled. Your Grace, perhaps we should consider a more cautious approach. If this is truly the dead we're facing, then we face them together, Jon interrupts, his dark eyes meeting Daenerys's violet ones. As we agreed. Daenerys nods slowly, feeling the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Through the great hall's windows, she can see Drogon perched in the godswood, his black scales glittering with frost. The dragon's head turns toward her, as if sensing her thoughts. How long to reach Last Hearth? She asks. Hard riding. We could be there by nightfall, Sir Davos replies, though the dragons could make it in half that time. Then that's what we'll do, Daenerys decides. Jon, can you ride? Jon's eyebrows rise in surprise. You mean? Viserion will carry you. Drogon and I will take the lead. Rhaegal can scout ahead. She turns to Grey Worm. Take 500 of your best. The rest stay to defend Winterfell. The great hall erupts in discussion as northern lords object to their king leaving Winterfell, but Jon raises his hand for silence. In his mind, he hears Bran's words again. Fire and ice must unite. Lord Karstark, you have command of the northern forces. Follow with all speed. Jon looks around the table, meeting each man's eyes. This is what we prepared for. Trust in our alliance. 2 hours later, the dragons rise from Winterfell's godswood, with thunderbeats of massive wings. Jon Snow sits astride Viserion's neck, his hands white-knuckled on the bronze saddle chains, while below him, the north spreads out like a map made real. Daenerys flies beside him on Drogon, her silver hair streaming in the wind. She calls out instructions in High Valyrian, guiding Jon through the basics of dragon riding as they soar north. The sensation is unlike anything he's ever experienced. The power of the great beast beneath him, the world shrinking to miniature below. Ahead of them, Rhaegal scouts the path to Last Hearth, his golden form cutting through grey clouds like a living spear. The green-bronze dragon's cries echo across the empty landscape, but no answering calls come from the earth below. There! Daenerys shouts over the wind, pointing toward a column of black smoke rising in the distance. Last Hearth. Jon's stomach clenches as they draw closer. The Umber stronghold sits in a valley surrounded by snow-covered hills, but what should be a bustling castle town shows only destruction. Buildings burn without defenders to fight the flames, and no living person moves in the streets. Rhaegal circles overhead, releasing a warning cry. In the castle's courtyard, Jon can see shapes moving, but they move wrong, jerky and unnatural. The dead walk among the ruins of Last Hearth, and at their center stands something that makes his blood freeze. A white walker, tall and terrible, with skin like ice and eyes like winter stars. The creature looks up at the approaching dragons without fear, raising a spear of crystalline ice toward the sky. There, Jon calls to Daenerys, pointing at the walker. That's what we came to kill. Drogon descends with a roar that shakes the castle walls. The great black dragon opens his maw, and dragonfire pours forth like liquid sunlight. The White Walker's ice spear melts in its hands, and the creature staggers backward as flames wash over the courtyard. But the Whites continue moving, unaffected by fear or pain. They surge toward the dragons as Jon and Daenerys land, their rusted weapons raised in skeletal hands. Jon slides from Viserion's back, drawing long claw as his boots hit the frozen ground. The Valyrian steel blade rings like a bell as it clears its sheath, and the sound seems to drive the wights back for a moment. "Stay close to the dragons," Daenerys shouts, dismounting from Drogon with fluid grace. "Their fire can clear a path." The battle erupts around them like a nightmare made real. Wights pour from the castle's buildings, their dead eyes reflecting dragonfire as Drogon and Viserion breathe destruction into their ranks. The smell of burning flesh fills the air, mixing with the cold wind to create something foul beyond description. Jon cuts down a wight that once might have been a young Umber guard, the Valyrian steel shearing through rotted mail like parchment. Beside him, Daenerys moves with deadly precision, a curved blade in each hand as she dances between grasping dead fingers. "Behind you!" Jon calls, spinning to intercept a wight approaching Daenerys' blind side. His blade takes the creature's head clean off, and the body crumbles to dust and bone. Overhead, Rhaegal dives into a cluster of wights, attempting to surround them, his golden fire turning the courtyard into an inferno. The dragons work in coordination, their flames creating corridors of safety for their riders to move through. But the White Walker still stands, protected by a wall of wights that reforms as fast as dragonfire can burn them down. The creature raises its hand, and the temperature drops so sharply that Jon's breath fogs even in the heat of battle. "The Walker," Daenerys gasps, pointing through the smoke. "We need to reach it." Jon nods, understanding without words. He's read the old texts, heard the stories from beyond the wall. Kill the Walker, and the wights it controls will fall. They charge together across the burning courtyard, dragons clearing their path with torrents of flame. Jon's swordwork and Daenerys' blades complement each other perfectly, as if they've fought as partners for years instead of minutes. The White Walker meets them at the castle steps, its ice blade ringing against Longclaw in a shower of sparks. Jon parries desperately while Daenerys circles, looking for an opening. The creature moves with inhuman speed, its weapon leaving trails of frost in the air. "Now!" Jon shouts, locking blades with the Walker and holding it in place. Daenerys strikes from behind, her Valyrian steel dagger finding the gap between the creature's armor plates. The White Walker's eyes widen in what might be surprise before it explodes into shards of ice that melt in the dragonfire. Around them, hundreds of wights collapse, like marionettes with cut strings. The sudden silence is deafening after the chaos of battle, broken only by the crackling of flames and the heavy breathing of dragons. Jon and Daenerys stand together in the smoking ruins, their weapons still ready, their eyes meeting across the destruction. Something passes between them in that moment, recognition, respect, and something deeper that neither is ready to name. "It's done," Daenerys says, quietly, lowering her blades. "For now," Jon replies, but he's not looking at the battlefield anymore. He's looking at her, seeing not just a queen, but a warrior who stood beside him when death walked the earth. A weak cry from the castle's tower breaks the spell between them. Survivors, Jon realizes. Some of House Umber's people made it through the attack. They find a dozen men, women, and children huddled in the tower's highest room, including young Lord Ned Umber, barely 10 years old, and trembling with cold and fear. "Your Grace," the boy whispers when he sees Jon. "They came in the night. So many of them. My father. He tried to hold the gates." Jon kneels beside the child, his voice gentle despite the horror around them. "You're safe now. We'll get you to Winterfell." But Daenerys is studying the castle's walls, her expression troubled. "This was just a scouting force," she says quietly to Jon. "A test of our defenses." An old Umber soldier, wounded but alive, overhears her words. "Aye, Your Grace," he rasps. "The Walker. It spoke before the attack. Said this was just the beginning. Said the Night King comes with an army 100,000 strong." Jon and Daenerys exchange a look, heavy with understanding. The real war hasn't begun yet. This was merely the first note in a song of ice and death that will echo across all of Westeros. As they prepare to evacuate the survivors, Jon finds himself watching Daenerys organize the rescue with calm efficiency. She speaks gently to the traumatized children, coordinates with Grey Worm to search for more survivors, and ensures the wounded receive immediate attention. "You fought well," Jon tells her, as they wait for Viserion to land. "So did you," she replies, then hesitates. "I've never fought beside someone I could trust so completely. It was different." Jon nods, understanding exactly what she means. In the heat of battle, they moved as one, each trusting the other to guard their back, to be where they needed when they needed them. As the dragons carry them back toward Winterfell with the last Hearth survivors, Jon realizes something fundamental has changed between him and Daenerys. They are no longer just political allies brought together by necessity. They are partners who have stood together against the darkness and emerged stronger for it. Behind them, Last Hearth burns, sending a pillar of smoke into the grey sky like a signal fire. The war has begun in earnest, and fire and ice have proven they can fight as one. The Raven from King's Landing arrives 3 days after the battle at Last Hearth, its message bearing the royal seal of Queen Cersei Lannister. Maester Wolkan brings the scroll to Jon Snow in his solar, where maps of the north cover every available surface, and candles burn low from long nights of war planning. Jon breaks the seal with careful fingers, recognizing the hand that wrote the message. Elegant script that barely conceals the venom beneath. He reads once, then again, his jaw tightening with each word. "What does she want?" Sansa asks from across the room, where she's been reviewing supply reports with Missandei. "My head, most likely," Jon replies grimly. "She demands I explain why I harbor a pretender to the Iron Throne, says that giving aid to Daenerys Targaryen is an act of treason against the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms." Tyrion looks up from his wine cup, his mismatched eyes showing interest despite his casual posture. "My dear sister always did have a flair for the dramatic. What does she threaten if you refuse her demand?" Jon sets the message on the table, where all can read it. The words are carefully chosen, but the meaning is clear. Bend the knee and surrender Daenerys, or face the consequences. She offers pardons to any northern lord who denounces the alliance, Jon says quietly. Gold, lands, titles. Everything an ambitious man might want. Sansa's face grows pale as she considers the implications. She's trying to turn our own lords against us. Some of them already doubt the wisdom of allying with a Targaryen. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Queen Cersei Lannister paces the throne room like a caged lioness. The Iron Throne looms behind her, its twisted metal reflecting torchlight across the great hall. Before her kneels a man in northern colors, one of Varys's former agents, turned by gold and threats into Cersei's spy. "Tell me again," Cersei commands, her green eyes fixed on the kneeling figure. "Dragons, in the north, fighting alongside the bastard king." "Aye, your grace," the spy confirms. 3 of them, large as houses. They burned the dead at Last Hearth, fought beside King Jon and the Dragon Queen, as if they were born to it. Jaime Lannister stands beside the throne in his gold cloak, his expression troubled. "If the reports are true, sister, this changes everything. Dragons haven't been seen in Westeros for over a century." Cersei turns on him sharply. "It changes nothing. Dragons can be killed. Targaryens can be killed. The North will learn the price of defying their rightful queen." She gestures to the Maester waiting nearby, who hurries forward with parchment and quill. Cersei begins dictating a series of letters, each one designed to sow discord in the north. "Write to Lord Glover at Deepwood Motte. Remind him of his family's long service to the crown. Offer him the wardenship of the north if he brings me Jon Snow's head and delivers the Dragon Queen in chains. At Winterfell, the great hall buzzes with tension as northern lords gather for an emergency council. News of Cersei's offers has spread quickly, carried by ravens and whispered conversations. Some faces show loyalty, others uncertainty, and a few poorly concealed ambition. Jon sits in the high seat, but he can feel the weight of doubt pressing down like a physical thing. Beside him, Daenerys maintains royal composure, though her violet eyes miss nothing of the political currents swirling around them. "Your Grace," Lord Glover says, rising from his seat with obvious reluctance. "We must speak plainly about our situation. The Queen in King's Landing offers pardons and rewards. What does continuing this alliance offer us but war?" Murmurs of agreement ripple through the hall. Jon notices which lords nod, which avoid his eyes, which lean forward with interest. "What does it offer?" Tyrion interjects smoothly, rising from his place near the high table. "Survival, my lord. Without dragons, without this alliance, the North falls to the dead within the month." Lady Lyanna Mormont stands on her chair, her young voice cutting through the discussion like a blade. "The dead don't care about pardons or gold. They care about adding us to their ranks. Anyone who thinks Queen Cersei will protect us from White Walkers is a fool." The great doors to the hall suddenly swing open, interrupting the heated discussion. A lone figure enters, travel-stained and hooded, moving with deadly grace across the stone floor. Jon's breath catches as the newcomer lowers her hood, revealing a face he hasn't seen in years. Arya Stark has come home. The hall falls silent as Arya approaches the high table, her grey eyes taking in every detail. The foreign queen sitting beside her brother, the Lannister dwarf offering counsel, the Targaryen banners hanging alongside Stark direwolves. "Brother," Arya says simply, inclining her head to Jon. Then her gaze shifts to Daenerys, and ice seems to fill the air between them. "Your Grace." Jon stands, emotions warring across his face. Joy at seeing his sister alive conflicts with awareness of the political implications of her arrival. "Arya, you're safe." "Safe enough," Arya replies, but her attention remains fixed on Daenerys. "I see things have changed since I left." Sansa moves quickly to her sister's side, embracing Arya with obvious relief. But even in their reunion, tension crackles between the Stark sisters as Arya's calculating gaze continues to study the Dragon Queen. "We have much to discuss," Sansa whispers to Arya. Privately. Later that evening, the Stark siblings gather in the Godswood beneath the Heart Tree. Jon explains the alliance, the White Walker threat, the political pressures from King's Landing. Arya listens without comment, her face revealing nothing. "You trust her," Arya says finally, though it's not entirely a question. Jon considers his words carefully. "I trust her to fight beside us against the dead. Beyond that," he shrugs, "trust must be earned." "She has dragons," Sansa adds pragmatically. "Without them we have no chance against the Night King's army." Arya nods slowly, processing this information. "And after? When the dead are defeated, do you think she'll simply sail away and leave you to rule the North in peace?" The question hangs in the cold air like a challenge. Jon has wondered the same thing himself, though he's avoided dwelling on it. "That's a problem for another day," he says finally. Meanwhile, in her chambers, Daenerys meets with her closest advisors to discuss the political crisis. Tyrion paces before the fire, while Varys studies intelligence reports, and Missandei sits quietly, listening to the discussion. "The Stark girl suspects my intentions," Daenerys observes. "She'll try to turn Jon against me." "Arya Stark is dangerous," Varys agrees. "She's trained with the faceless men, learned to kill without emotion or hesitation, but she's also fiercely loyal to her family." Tyrion stops pacing, turning to face his queen. "Which gives us an opportunity. If we can prove our commitment to protecting her family, to protecting the North, we might win her over." Daenerys stands and moves to the window, looking out over Winterfell's courtyard where her dragons roost in the Godswood. The sight of them fills her with pride and power, but also with growing uncertainty. "What would you have me do?" she asks. "Give them something no conqueror has ever offered," Tyrion says quietly. "Give them their independence." The suggestion hits the room like a physical blow. Varys's eyebrows rise in surprise, while Missandei looks concerned. Daenerys turns sharply to face her hand. "Renounce my claim to the north? That goes against everything I've worked for." "Does it?" Tyrion challenges. "You came to Westeros to rule, yes, but you also came to break chains, to create a better world. What chains are heavier than those of unwilling submission?" The next morning brings another crisis. Lord Glover rides to Winterfell with 100 men, ostensibly to pledge support, but actually to test the political winds. His arrival draws other uncertain lords, creating a gathering that could either strengthen the alliance or tear it apart. Jon calls for a great assembly in Winterfell's courtyard, where all might hear what needs to be said. Northern lords gather alongside Dothraki warriors and unsullied soldiers, while 3 dragons perch in the godswood like living monuments to power. "Lords of the North," Jon begins, his voice carrying across the crowd, "we face a choice that will determine the fate of our people. Stand together against the darkness, or fall divided before it." Murmurs ripple through the assembly. Some lords nod agreement, others exchange uncertain glances. Lord Glover steps forward, his face set in hard lines. "Your Grace, we've served House Stark for 1,000 years, but we swore no oaths to foreign queens or dragons." Before Jon can respond, Daenerys stands. The Queen approaches the edge of the platform, her violet eyes sweeping across the assembled Northerners. When she speaks, her voice carries the authority of dragons, but also something else: respect. "Lords of the North," she begins, "I am Daenerys of House Targaryen, and I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as an ally. You owe me no oaths, no service, no submission." The crowd stirs restlessly. Even Jon looks surprised by her words. "When the war against the dead is won," Daenerys continues, her voice growing stronger, "the North will remain free to choose its own path. I formally renounce any Targaryen claim to northern independence. Your king has earned your loyalty, and you have earned the right to grant or withhold it, as you see fit." Stunned silence greets this declaration. Lord Glover's mouth falls open, while other northern lords exchange amazed looks. Even Tyrion appears surprised by his queen's boldness. Jon stares at Daenerys, understanding the magnitude of what she's just done. She has given up a kingdom to secure an alliance, placed trust above conquest. "However," Daenerys adds, her voice carrying a note of steel, "until that war is won, we fight together. Dragon and direwolf, fire and ice, united against the darkness that would devour us all." Lord Glover looks around at his fellow lords, seeing the impact of the Dragon Queen's words. Slowly, reluctantly, he bends his knee. "The North remembers, Your Grace," he says quietly, "and the North will not forget this gesture." One by one, the other lords follow his example. The alliance holds, strengthened by sacrifice rather than conquest. But in the shadows of the Godswood, Arya Stark watches with calculating eyes, wondering if the Dragon Queen's words can be trusted when the real test comes. As the assembly disperses, Jon finds himself standing beside Daenerys in the courtyard, both of them understanding that something fundamental has changed between them. She has proven her commitment to the North, but at a cost that will reshape the very nature of her claim to the Iron Throne. "That was unexpected," Jon says quietly. Daenerys nods, her eyes distant. "But necessary. Trust cannot be commanded, Jon Snow. It must be earned and paid for in the coin that matters most to those you seek to lead." In the distance, ravens take flight from Winterfell's towers, carrying news of the Dragon Queen's declaration across the Seven Kingdoms. The Game of Thrones has taken an unexpected turn, and Queen Cersei Lannister's careful plans suddenly seem far less certain of success. The attack comes at dawn, not from one direction, but from a dozen. Ravens arrive at Winterfell in a black cloud, each bearing news of disaster from across the north. White Walkers strike simultaneously at Carhold, Deepwood Motte, the Dreadfort, and half a dozen smaller strongholds, their coordination speaking of intelligence and planning that chills Jon Snow's blood. They're not just raiding, Bran says from his wheelchair in the Great Hall, his empty eyes distant with visions. They're advancing on multiple fronts. The Night King means to break our ability to respond. Jon studies the map spread across the high table, red markers showing confirmed attacks, while black pins mark suspected movements. The pattern becomes clear. The dead are driving toward the river crossings that connect the north to the rest of Westeros. The twins, Daenerys says, her finger tracing the path on the map. If they take the crossing at the Green Fork, they can pour south into the Riverlands. Tyrion nods grimly. And from there, the entire continent lies open. We have to hold the river. Grey Worm enters the hall with urgent steps, his bronze armor bearing fresh scratches from hurried preparations. Your Grace, the armies are ready. 1,500 Unsullied, 2,000 Dothraki, 3,000 Northerners. All that can be spared from Winterfell's defences. Jon looks around the table at faces he's learned to trust. Sansa, managing the logistics of war with quiet efficiency. Arya, newly returned, but already studying the tactical situation with killer's eyes. Daenerys, her violet gaze fixed on the map with the intensity of a dragon. We ride for the twins, Jon decides. If we can hold the crossing, we buy time for the other strongholds to evacuate their people. Within hours, the largest army the North has seen in generations marches south through falling snow. 3 dragons circle overhead like great shadows, their cries echoing across the white landscape. On the ground, Dothraki horse archers ride beside northern heavy cavalry, while unsullied spear companies march in perfect formation behind Jon Snow's banner. Daenerys flies ahead on Drogon, scouting the path to the twins. Below her, the Green Fork runs black between snow-covered banks, its waters reflecting the grey sky like a mirror. The ancient stronghold of House Frey sits astride the river, its twin towers connected by a stone bridge that has controlled this crossing for 600 years. But as Drogon descends toward the castle, Daenerys sees something that makes her blood freeze. The twins are burning, black smoke rising from both towers, and across the frozen ground around the castle, the dead march in numbers beyond counting. She speaks a command in High Valyrian, and Drogon releases a roar that shakes the very air. The sound carries for miles, warning the approaching army of what awaits them. Jon hears the dragon's cry from 2 miles away, understanding its meaning without need for words. He spurs his horse forward, calling orders to the column behind him. Battle formation, Dothraki on the flanks, Unsullied center, Northern cavalry in reserve. The army deploys across the snow-covered fields south of the twins as the enemy comes into view. Thousands upon thousands of whites surge around the burning castle, while White Walkers on dead horses direct their movements with inhuman precision. At their center stands something that makes even veteran soldiers whisper prayers, an ice dragon, its crystalline scales gleaming as it perches atop the twins' great hall. 7 hells, Tyrion breathes, his face pale as he takes in the sight. They have their own dragon. Daenerys lands Drogon beside the command position, her expression grim as she dismounts. The castle is lost, hundreds dead, maybe thousands. But if we can break their line, some might still escape across the river. Jon nods, drawing Longclaw as trumpets sound across the field. Then we break them. The battle erupts with the fury of a winter storm. Dothraki screamers charge into the white ranks with curved swords flashing, their war cries mixing with the groans of the dead. Behind them, Unsullied advance in perfect formation, their bronze-tipped spears finding targets with mechanical precision. Dragons clash above the battlefield as Drogon and Rhaegal engage the ice dragon in aerial combat. The creatures tear at each other with teeth and claws, while dragonfire meets ice breath in clouds of steam that obscure half the field. Jon cuts through the white lines atop his destrier, Longclaw shearing through rusted mail and rotted flesh. Around him, northern knights charge in wedge formations, their steel bright against the grey sky. But for every white that falls, two more take its place. Arya Stark moves through the battle like death itself, her Valyrian steel dagger finding gaps in armor while needle dances in her offhand. A group of Unsullied becomes separated from their main formation, surrounded by pressing whites, and Arya appears among them like a ghost. "Form square," she commands in the broken Valyrian she learned in Braavos. "Shields out, spears ready." The Unsullied obey without question, recognizing competence regardless of its source. Together they carve through the white ranks, Arya's speed complementing their discipline as they fight their way back to friendly lines. Grey Worm sees the rescue and nods approval. "The wolf pup has teeth," he tells his sergeant. "She fights like one of us." Meanwhile, above the battle, disaster strikes without warning. The ice dragon breaks from combat with Rhaegal and dives toward Viserion, its crystalline claws raking across the cream-colored dragon's wing. Viserion tumbles from the sky, blood streaming from terrible wounds as he crashes into the frozen river. Daenerys screams in anguish, feeling the death of her child like a physical blow. Drogon responds to her pain with fury, his flames turning white-hot as he burns a path of destruction through the enemy ranks. But the damage is done. Viserion lies motionless on the ice, his golden eyes already growing dim. "Fall back," Jon shouts, seeing the tide of battle turning. "Fighting retreat to the river." The withdrawal becomes a nightmare of blood and snow. Whites press from all sides as the living army pulls back toward the Green Fork, leaving hundreds of dead in their wake. Dothraki riders provide rear guard, their horse bows sending volleys into the pursuing masses, while northern infantry maintain desperate shield walls. Tyrion coordinates the evacuation from horseback, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. "Get the wounded across first. Burn the bridge when the last man is over." Arya finds herself fighting beside a group of Unsullied who have become cut off from the main retreat. Their spears create a circle of death around a cluster of northern civilians who fled the burning twins, but the whites press closer with each passing moment. "We cannot hold," the Unsullied sergeant says calmly, as if discussing the weather. "They are too many." "Then we die well," Arya replies, but her mind is already working. She's seen the way Grey Worm coordinates his men, understands their discipline. "Can your men follow me?" The sergeant looks at the young Stark girl, seeing something deadly in her grey eyes. "We follow." Arya leads them in a fighting withdrawal toward a collapsed section of the castle wall, using the rubble to funnel the whites into a narrow killing ground. Her training with the Faceless Men shows as she moves between the Unsullied spears, her blade finding the weak points in white armor with surgical precision. "Like this," she demonstrates to one soldier, showing him how to angle his spear thrust for maximum effect. "Aim for the joints. Dead men don't feel pain, but they still need functioning limbs to fight." The technique spreads through the Unsullied ranks as they adapt her lessons to their formation fighting. Together, they hold the breach long enough for the civilians to escape across the bridge, then fall back in good order to rejoin the main army. Jon and Daenerys make their stand at the bridge itself, dragons providing cover as the last elements of their army cross the dark water. Drogon's flames create a wall of fire that holds back the white advance, but they can see the ice dragon circling for another attack. "We have to go," Jon tells Daenerys, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "We've saved who we can." Daenerys looks back at Viserion's still form on the far bank, her heart breaking for the child she'll never hold again. But she also sees the thousands of people streaming south across the bridge, soldiers and civilians alike who live because of their sacrifice. "Burn it," she commands, her voice steady despite her tears. Drogon's fire consumes the ancient stone bridge in a roar of flame and steam. The crossing that has stood for 6 centuries collapses into the Green Fork, its destruction buying precious time as the dead gather on the northern bank. As the army continues its fighting retreat toward Winterfell, Jon rides beside Daenerys in silence. They've blooded the enemy, saved thousands of lives, but the cost has been terrible. An entire dragon lost, hundreds of soldiers dead, and the enemy still advancing with relentless purpose. "I'm sorry," Jon says finally, his voice barely audible over the wind. "About Viserion." Daenerys nods, her face set in lines of grief and determination. "He died protecting the north. That's what he would have wanted." Behind them, smoke rises from the ruins of the twins, while the ice dragon's cries echo across the battlefield. The war has taken a dark turn, but the alliance holds together through loss and sacrifice. Fire and ice have been tested in the crucible of battle, and though wounded, they remain unbroken. Arya rides with the unsullied rear guard, having earned their respect through blood and steel. Grey Worm himself acknowledges her with a formal nod as they establish the Knight's defensive perimeter. "You fight with honor," he tells her in his careful common tongue. "Honor doesn't keep you alive," Arya replies. "But good friends help." The comment draws what might be a smile from the stoic commander. As the army prepares for another night of march toward Winterfell, strange bonds of trust continue to form between the most unlikely of allies. In the distance, wolves howl across the snow-covered landscape, as if mourning the dragon that died defending their ancient home. The Night King's army has won a victory at the Twins, but they have also learned that the living will not surrender without extracting a terrible price for every mile of ground. The retreat continues through the long night, but it is not a rout. It is the withdrawal of an army that has found its purpose in protecting those who cannot protect themselves, and in that purpose, even defeat carries the seeds of ultimate victory. The army of the dead appears on the horizon at dusk, a black tide flowing across the white landscape like spilled ink. From Winterfell's battlements, Jon Snow watches through a spyglass as whites beyond, counting march in perfect silence toward his ancestral home. No drums beat, no horns sound, only the whisper of countless feet through snow breaks the terrible quiet. "How many?" Daenerys asks, joining him at the parapet. Her breath mists in the freezing air as she studies the approaching force. "Too many to count," Jon replies grimly. 100,000, perhaps more, and they're not stopping. Behind them, Winterfell transforms into a fortress unlike any in its long history. Northern engineers work alongside unsullied sappers, reinforcing walls with dragonglass spikes and oil-filled trenches. Dothraki horse archers man the towers while northern bowmen string their bows with obsidian-headed arrows. In the Godswood, Drogon and Rhaegal roost beneath the heart tree, their massive forms dwarfing the ancient weirwood. The dragons sense the approaching darkness, releasing low rumbles that echo through Winterfell's courtyards. Without Viserion, their aerial advantage has been cut by a third, and everyone feels the loss. "The dead don't tire," Tyrion observes from beside the great brazier that now burns constantly in the courtyard. "They don't need food, sleep, or warmth. They can simply wait." Sansa approaches with a ledger in her hands, her face drawn with exhaustion from days of siege preparations. "We have enough supplies for 3 months if we ration strictly. After that," she doesn't need to finish the thought. By midnight, the dead have surrounded Winterfell completely. They stand in ranks that stretch beyond the light of torches, a silent army that waits without moving, without speaking, without any sign of humanity. At their center, barely visible in the darkness, the Night King sits astride his ice dragon, watching the castle with eyes like winter stars. Jon calls his war council to the Great Hall, where maps and tactical reports cover the high table. Representatives from every faction gather around the table, Northern lords, Dothraki blood riders, unsullied officers, and Daenerys' advisors. They're testing our defenses, Grey Worm reports, his bronze armor bearing fresh scratches from a skirmish at the gates. Small probes, looking for weak points. They learn from each attempt. Sir Davos nods grimly. Aye, they're cleverer than we hoped. They've blocked every road, every path. No one gets in or out. Bran rolls his wheelchair closer to the table, his strange eyes reflecting the firelight. I can see them moving beneath the ground, he says in his flat voice. Ancient tunnels, forgotten passages. They're trying to find ways under our walls. Then we use those same tunnels, Varys interjects smoothly. My little birds know every secret way in and out of Winterfell. We can move supplies, messages, even small strike teams through passages the dead haven't discovered yet. Arya leans forward, studying the tunnel map that Maester Wolkan spreads across the table. I know these passages. Some connect to the crypts, others lead to the Godswood. We could set up supply caches, fallback positions. Do it, Jon decides. Arya, work with Varys to organize the tunnel networks. Bran, keep watching their movements. Warn us if they find a way through. Meanwhile, in the depths of Winterfell's crypts, Varys meets with his network of informants, servants, stable boys, kitchen maids who have learned to move like ghosts through the ancient castle. By candlelight, he coordinates intelligence gathering that would seem impossible to anyone who doesn't understand the power of information. The dead have shamans, reports a young woman who once served in the Night's Watch before joining Varys' network. Dressed in ice and shadow, they direct the whites like puppet masters, kill the shamans, and their sections of the army fall into chaos. Varys nods, filing the information away. Excellent. What of their supply lines? They don't have any, my lord. They are their own supply. Every man who falls joins their ranks. The spider's expression grows troubled. This is a different kind of warfare, one where traditional intelligence advantages mean less when facing an enemy that doesn't eat, sleep, or communicate in ways human spies can intercept. Above ground, the siege settles into a pattern of constant vigilance. Drogon and Rhaegal patrol the skies, their flames creating circles of light that push back the darkness. But the ice dragon never rises to meet them, content to wait and watch from the enemy lines. They're smart, Daenerys admits to Jon during one of their planning sessions. They know my dragons have the advantage in aerial combat, so they wait for us to come to them. Jon studies the enemy positions from the battlements, noting how the whites have arranged themselves just beyond the range of dragonfire from the walls. They've learned from the twins. They won't give us easy targets again. 3 days into the siege, the first real test comes. The dead launch simultaneous assaults on 3 gates, sending waves of whites against the defenders, while ice spiders large as hounds skitter up the walls like nightmare creatures from children's stories. Arya leads a strike team through the tunnel network, emerging behind enemy lines to eliminate the shamans directing the assault on the King's Gate. Her Valyrian steel blade cuts through ice armor like paper, while unsullied soldiers clear the whites with mechanical precision. There, Arya points to a figure in crystalline armor, standing atop a small rise. That one commands the spiders. They charge across the frozen ground, dodging between whites that move too slowly to track their passage. The ice shaman turns as they approach, raising a spear of living frost that seems to drink in the light around it. But Arya has learned patience from the faceless men, precision from her water dancing lessons. She waits for the perfect moment, then strikes with the speed of a striking snake. Needle finds the gap in the creature's armor, and the shaman explodes into shards of ice. Around them, dozens of ice spiders collapse instantly, their strings cut by their master's death. The assault on the King's Gate falters, giving the defenders time to reinforce their positions. Well done, Grey Worm tells Arya as they retreat through the tunnels. You fight like death itself. Sometimes death is what's needed, Arya replies, cleaning Needle's blade on a piece of cloth. In the Great Hall, Bran sits motionless for hours at a time, his consciousness ranging far beyond his physical form. Through the eyes of ravens and wolves, he watches the enemy's movements, tracking their patrols and identifying their command structure. "They're looking for something," he reports to Jon and Daenerys. "Not just victory, something specific. The Night King searches the castle with purpose." "Searching for what?" Jon asks. Bran's eyes grow distant. "Me. He knows what I am, what I can see. As long as I live, his army cannot move without being watched." The revelation sends ice through Jon's veins. "Then we protect you, whatever it takes." "Protection won't be enough," Bran says quietly. "He'll keep coming until he reaches me. The only way to end this is to kill him, and he knows we know that." As the siege drags into its second week, supplies begin running low despite careful rationing. Varys's tunnel network provides some relief, bringing in small amounts of food and medicine through forgotten passages, but it's not enough to sustain the defenders indefinitely. Jon and Daenerys meet in the Godswood beneath the Heart Tree, where the dragon's presence keeps enemy scouts from approaching. The ancient red leaves whisper in the cold wind, as if the old gods themselves are holding council. "We can't wait much longer," Daenerys says, her violet eyes reflecting the firelight from Drogon's nostrils. "Every day we delay, we grow weaker while they stay the same." Jon nods, his hand resting on Longclaw's pommel. "Then we take the fight to them. Direct assault on the Night King's position." "Aerial strike," Daenerys agrees. "Fast, brutal, decisive. Get close enough for dragonfire to reach him before his ice dragon can intercept." "And if it doesn't work?" Daenerys looks at her remaining children, remembering Viserion's death at the Twins. "Then we die trying. But at least we die fighting, not cowering behind walls while our people starve." They spend the next day planning the assault with military precision. Timing, approach vectors, contingency plans for every scenario they can imagine. The dragons will carry Jon and Daenerys directly to the Night King's position, while the ground forces launch diversionary attacks to draw attention away from the aerial strike. As night falls over Winterfell, the longest siege in the castle's history enters its most dangerous phase. Tomorrow will bring either victory or annihilation, and everyone knows the stakes have never been higher. In the crypts, common soldiers and lords alike pray to whatever gods they hold dear. In the Great Hall, final preparations are made for a battle that will determine the fate of all life in Westeros. And in the Godswood, 2 dragons and their riders prepare to challenge death itself in the cold northern sky. The dead wait in their silent ranks, patient as winter, while the living make ready for the most desperate gamble in the history of warfare. Fire and ice will meet in the air above Winterfell, and only one will survive to see the dawn. Bran sits beneath the Heart Tree, his consciousness touching the edges of fate itself. In his visions, he sees flames and ice, dragons and death, but the ultimate outcome remains hidden behind a wall of swirling snow and shadow. The long night has only just begun, but its ending approaches like thunder on the horizon. Dawn breaks grey and cold over Winterfell as Jon Snow stands in the Godswood, his hand resting on Rhaegal's bronze scales. The golden dragon watches him with intelligent eyes, understanding passing between them without words. In the distance, the army of the dead waits in perfect silence, their ranks stretching beyond the horizon like a frozen sea. "He knows you," Daenerys says, approaching through the falling snow. Drogon follows behind her, the black dragon's massive form dwarfing the Heart Tree. "Rhaegal has been watching you since we arrived. Dragons choose their riders as much as riders choose dragons." Jon nods, feeling the weight of what they're about to attempt. "I've never ridden into battle before, only that one flight to Last Hearth." "Trust him," Daenerys replies, checking the bronze chains that secure her saddle to Drogon's back. "Trust yourself. Today we end this siege, one way or another. In the Great Hall, Grey Worm coordinates the ground assault with mathematical precision. Maps cover the high table showing enemy positions, while unsullied officers relay orders to mixed units of northern soldiers, Dothraki warriors, and disciplined spearmen. When the dragons engage the Ice Dragon, Grey Worm explains to his sergeants, we strike at 3 points simultaneously. The dead will look to the sky, giving us moments to break their lines. Arya studies the tactical plans with keen interest. The tunnels can get small groups behind their shamans, cut the head off the snake while the dragons provide distraction. Exactly, Grey Worm confirms. Speed and precision. We cannot match their numbers, but we can outthink them. Meanwhile, on Winterfell's highest tower, Bran sits motionless as his consciousness ranges across the battlefield. Through the eyes of ravens, he watches the Night King astride his ice dragon, the creature's crystalline scales gleaming in the pale morning light. The ancient enemy knows what comes, yet shows no fear. He's waiting, Bran reports to Tyrion, who coordinates communications between the various strike teams. The Night King wants this fight. He's confident in his victory. Tyrion's expression grows troubled. Confidence can be dangerous, but so can overconfidence. The assault begins with a roar that shakes the very stones of Winterfell. Drogon and Rhaegal rise from the godswood like twin thunderbolts, their wings beating massive drafts that scatter snow across the courtyard. Jon grips the bronze saddle chains as Rhaegal climbs toward the grey sky, the sensation of flight still foreign but exhilarating. Below them, Winterfell's gates burst open. Grey Worm leads the unsullied charge in a bronze wedge that drives deep into the white ranks, while Dothraki screamers flow around the flanks with curved swords flashing. Northern heavy cavalry follows, their steel bright against the morning gloom. There, Daenerys calls over the wind, pointing toward the enemy's center. The Night King rises. The ice dragon launches itself skyward with movements that seem to bend reality around it. Its crystalline wings catch the light like prisms, while breath that freezes the very air streams from its maw. The creature's blue eyes burn with cold fire as it climbs to meet the approaching dragons. Together, Jon shouts, and Rhaegal responds with a roar that echoes across the battlefield. The aerial battle erupts 300 feet above Winterfell's towers. Dragonfire meets ice breath in explosions of steam that obscure half the sky. Drogon and Rhaegal work in coordination, their flames creating corridors of superheated air while their claws seek purchase on their crystalline opponent. Jon draws Longclaw as Rhaegal grapples with the ice dragon, the Valyrian steel blade ringing as it clears its sheath. He can see the Night King astride his mount, those terrible blue eyes fixed on him with ancient hatred. "Dracarys!" Daenerys commands, and Drogon's flames wash over the ice dragon's wing. The creature screams, a sound like breaking glaciers, but doesn't fall. Meanwhile, on the ground, Arya leads her strike team through the chaos of battle. They emerge from hidden tunnels behind enemy lines, their Valyrian steel weapons cutting through ice shamans with deadly precision. Each fallen commander sends dozens of wights into confusion, creating gaps in the enemy formation. The eastern flank is breaking, Sir Davos reports from the command position, his spyglass trained on the battlefield. Grey Worm's doing it. He's actually pushing them back. The Unsullied advance like a bronze machine, their spear points finding targets with mechanical efficiency. Behind them, northern archers send volleys of dragonglass arrows into the white ranks, while Dothraki horse archers wheel and strike at isolated pockets of resistance. Above the battle, Jon feels Rhaegal shudder as ice dragon claws rake across the golden dragon's flank. Blood streams from deep gashes, but Rhaegal doesn't falter. Instead, the dragon twists in midair, bringing Jon within striking distance of the Night King. Longclaw meets the Night King's ice blade in a shower of sparks that fall like stars toward the battlefield below. The ancient enemy is stronger than any human, his crystalline sword leaving trails of frost in the air. But Jon has learned to fight with dragon speed beneath him. "Now, Drogon!" Daenerys screams, and the black dragon dives from above. The Night King's mount banks desperately to avoid Drogon's flames, exposing its rider to Jon's strike. Longclaw's Valyrian steel finds its mark, slicing deep across the Night King's shoulder. The wound bleeds ice instead of blood, but the ancient enemy staggers in his saddle. For a moment, the Night King's control wavers. Across the battlefield, thousands of wights freeze in place as their master's attention fragments. Grey Worm seizes the opportunity, driving his spear line deep into the enemy's heart while they stand motionless. But the moment passes quickly. The Night King recovers, his blue eyes blazing with fury as he raises his ice blade toward the sky. The temperature drops so suddenly that frost forms on dragon scales, and even Drogon's flames seem to dim. "He's too strong," Jon calls to Daenerys as Rhaegal struggles against the sudden cold. "We need to retreat." "Not yet," she replies, but her voice lacks its usual certainty. Below them, the ice dragon is rallying, its wounds already beginning to seal with new ice. The battle turns when Bran acts. From his position on Winterfell's tower, the three-eyed raven reaches out with his power, touching the minds of every raven and wolf within leagues of the battle. They descend on the Night King's forces in a black cloud, pecking at eyes and tearing at exposed flesh. The distraction lasts only moments, but it's enough. Arya appears behind one of the Night King's shamans, needles sliding between ribs of ice with surgical precision. The creature's death sends a section of the army into chaos, creating a cascade of confusion that spreads through their ranks. "Press the attack," Grey Worm commands, his bronze spear dripping with dark ichor. "Now, while they're confused." The combined assault of dragons above and soldiers below proves too much for even the Night King to coordinate. His forces begin pulling back from Winterfell's walls, the dead withdrawing with the same eerie silence that marked their arrival. But the Night King himself doesn't retreat. Instead, he guides his ice dragon in one final assault on the brothers fighting above. Ice breath and dragon claws create a maelstrom of violence that sends all three dragons tumbling toward the earth. They crash in Winterfell's courtyard with impacts that crack the ancient stones. Jon rolls clear of Rhaegal's saddle, his ribs aching from the fall, while Daenerys staggers away from Drogon's smoking form. Both dragons are wounded, but alive, their blood steaming in the cold air. The Night King's ice dragon lies motionless nearby, its crystalline body shattered beyond repair. The Night King himself stands among the wreckage, his ice blade raised toward Jon and Daenerys. But something has changed. The ancient enemy moves more slowly, his shoulder wound weeping streams of ice that don't heal. "You cannot stop what comes," the Night King speaks for the first time in the battle, his voice like winter wind. Death is patient. Death is eternal. Jon raises Longclaw, the Valyrian steel reflecting the pale sunlight. Maybe. But today, death retreats. The Night King's blue eyes study them for a long moment. Then he turns and walks toward the shattered gates. His remaining forces part before him like a frozen sea, and together they begin the long march north toward whatever dark sanctuary awaits them. Victory, but at a terrible price. The courtyard is filled with the wounded and dying, Northerners, Dothraki, and Unsullied alike. Grey Worm coordinates the evacuation of casualties with grim efficiency, his bronze armor dented and blood-stained from the fight. "How many?" Jon asks Ser Davos as they survey the aftermath. 2,000 dead. "Maybe more," the old knight replies heavily. "Half our cavalry, a third of the infantry. We won, but we bled for it." Daenerys kneels beside Drogon, examining the deep gashes across his flank. The great dragon will live, but he'll bear scars from this battle for the rest of his days. Rhaegal limps toward his brother, one wing hanging awkwardly from ice dragon claws. "They'll heal," Daenerys says, but her voice carries the weight of loss, not just for Viserion, dead at the Twins, but for all the brave souls who fell defending Winterfell. In the great hall that evening, A subdued victory feast brings together survivors from all the allied forces. Northern lords sit beside Dothraki blood riders, while unsullied officers share tables with Winterfell's servants. The bonds forged in battle run deeper than politics or culture. To the fallen, Jon raises his cup, and the toast echoes through the hall. And to those who stood beside us when darkness fell. Arya finds herself seated between Grey Worm and a young Dothraki warrior, their respect for her earned in blood and steel. "You fought well today," she tells them both. "I'm honored to call you allies." "The honor is ours, Wolfpup," the Dothraki replies, his usual fierce demeanor softened by genuine respect. As the feast continues into the night, Jon and Daenerys slip away to the battlements. The siege is broken, the immediate threat ended, but they both understand this is only the beginning. The Night King lives, wounded but not defeated, and will return with whatever forces he can muster. "We hurt him," Daenerys observes, watching the aurora dance across the northern sky. For the first time in millennia, someone wounded the Night King in battle. Jon nods, feeling the weight of Longclaw at his side. But he'll be back, and next time he'll be ready for dragons. "Then we'd better be ready for him," she replies, her violet eyes reflecting the distant lights. "Whatever it takes." The long night is ending, but the war for the dawn has only just begun. In the distance, wolves howl across the snow-covered landscape, calling to the dragons that roosting in Winterfell's Godswood. Fire and ice have proven they can fight as one, but their greatest test still lies ahead. The raven from King's Landing arrives just as Winterfell begins to heal from the siege. Maester Wolkan delivers the message to Jon Snow in his solar, where reports of battlefield casualties still cover his desk in grim columns of numbers. The royal seal bears fresh wax, as if Cersei Lannister couldn't wait to respond to news of the northern victory. Jon breaks the seal with steady fingers, though his jaw tightens as he reads the elegant script within. When he finishes, he sets the parchment down carefully and looks out the window toward the Godswood, where 2 wounded dragons rest beneath the heart tree. "She's coming," he says simply. Daenerys enters the solar without ceremony, her silver hair still showing traces of soot from the battle. Behind her, Tyrion limps slightly from a wound sustained during the siege, but his eyes remain sharp as he studies Jon's expression. "Cersei?" Daenerys asks, though the answer is written on Jon's face. 50,000 men, the combined armies of the Reach, the Westerlands, and what's left of the Stormlands. She's already crossed the neck. Tyrion moves to the window, calculating distances and march times in his head. 2 weeks, maybe less. She's moving faster than I would have expected. "She knows we're wounded," Jon replies grimly. "Half our forces lost in the siege, dragons barely able to fly. She's chosen her moment well." Meanwhile, in the Great Hall, Sansa Stark meets with a collection of ravens and riders who have been arriving throughout the morning. Her desk overflows with messages bearing the seals of houses from across the 7 kingdoms, not all of them friendly to the current queen in King's Landing. Missandei enters quietly, carrying supply reports and casualty lists, but stops when she sees the political correspondence spread before Sansa. Messages from the Vale, the Riverlands, even some houses in the Reach, Sansa explains, her blue eyes meeting Missandei's brown ones. "I've been building alliances since before Daenerys arrived. Insurance, in case things went badly." "Your queen doesn't know?" Missandei asks carefully. "She had enough to worry about with the dead at our gates. But now—" Sansa gathers several letters bearing broken seals. "Now these alliances might save us all." That afternoon, Jon calls for a council of war in the Great Hall. The High Table bears maps showing Cersei's advancing forces, while representatives from all the allied factions gather to discuss their desperate situation. "We're outnumbered 2-1, Grey Worm reports with characteristic bluntness. "Our Unsullied are disciplined, but they need time to recover from the siege. The Dothraki lost many horses. It will be weeks before we're ready for another major battle. Lord Royce of the Vale leans forward, his weathered hands tracing the enemy's route on the map. The Twins' crossing is destroyed. She'll have to take the long way around, through the neck. That buys us time, but not much. Daenerys studies the tactical situation with growing frustration. The dragons aren't ready for extended flight, much less combat. Rhaegal can barely lift off the ground. And Drogon... She doesn't finish the thought, but everyone understands. Her greatest advantage has been neutralized by the siege. There is another option, Tyrion says quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. A political solution. Jon looks up sharply. What kind of solution? Marriage, Tyrion replies, his eyes moving between Jon and Daenerys. A formal alliance between the king in the north and the Dragon Queen. It would legitimize your joint rule and give pause to any lord thinking of supporting Cersei against you. The suggestion hangs in the air like a challenge. Jon feels every eye in the room upon him, while Daenerys maintains careful neutrality despite the color rising in her cheeks. Political marriages rarely end well, Arya observes from her place near the wall, especially when dragons are involved. This wouldn't be purely political, Jon says quietly, his dark eyes meeting Daenerys's violet ones. Would it? Before she can answer, the great doors burst open. Bran rolls his wheelchair into the hall with unusual urgency, his strange eyes distant with visions that stretch across time and space. There's something you need to know, he says, his flat voice cutting through the political discussion. About your birth, Jon. About who you really are. The hall falls silent as Bran's words register. Sansa looks stricken, while Tyrion's eyebrows rise with sudden understanding. Only Daenerys seems confused by the revelation building around them. What do you mean? She asks, but her voice lacks its usual certainty. Samwell Tarly enters the hall behind Bran, his face pale with the weight of knowledge. The maester in training carries a leather satchel filled with ancient documents, including records from the High Septon himself. Your Grace, Sam addresses Jon formally, his voice trembling slightly. You're not Ned Stark's bastard. You're the son of Lyanna Stark and Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Your real name is Aegon Targaryen, and you're the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The revelation hits the room like a physical blow. Several northern lords exchange shocked glances, while Daenerys stares at Jon as if seeing him for the first time. The political implications are staggering. Jon isn't just her ally, he's her nephew and her rival for the crown she's spent her life trying to claim. That's impossible, Daenerys whispers, though the truth is written in Bran's unblinking stare. Rhaegar and Lyanna were married, Sam continues, his voice growing stronger. In secret, but legitimately. The High Septon's records are clear. Jon, Aegon, is true-born. Jon feels the world shifting beneath his feet. Everything he's believed about himself, his father's honor, his place in the world, suddenly crumbles into uncertainty. He looks around the hall at faces that mix shock, calculation, and fear. I don't want it, he says finally, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. I never asked for any of this. Want rarely matters when it comes to crowns, Tyrion observes, but his tone is gentle. The question is what we do with this knowledge. Meanwhile, in a private chamber, Varys meets with one of his informants, a young woman who has been carrying messages between various factions since the siege began. The Master of Whisperers reviews the intelligence she's gathered, his expression growing troubled as patterns emerge. So Sansa Stark has been building her own alliance network, he muses, studying coded messages from across the Seven Kingdoms. Clever girl. She's ensured the North has options regardless of how the war unfolds. There's more, my lord, the spy reports. Some of the letters mention Queen Cersei directly. Lady Stark has been hedging her bets. Varys burns the message after reading it, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. The Game of Thrones continues even in the face of extinction, and information remains the most dangerous weapon in Westeros. Later that evening, Jon and Daenerys walk the battlements in uncomfortable silence. Below them, Winterfell slowly returns to normal. Soldiers tend wounds, craftsmen repair damage, and the business of living continues despite the political turmoil. "Everything's changed," Jon says finally, his breath misting in the cold air. "Has it?" Daenerys replies, her violet eyes reflecting the torchlight. "You're still the same man who fought beside me against the dead. That hasn't changed. But I'm also your nephew, and technically, I have a better claim to the Iron Throne than you do." Daenerys nods slowly, the weight of that truth settling between them. "Yes, you do." They walk in silence for several minutes before Jon speaks again. "I meant what I said in the hall. I don't want the Iron Throne. I never have. But others will want it for you," Daenerys points out. "Lords who see opportunity in a male Targaryen with northern support." Jon stops walking, turning to face her fully. "Then we don't give them the chance. We marry, as Tyrion suggested. Joint rule, shared power. Fire and ice united not just in battle but in governance." Daenerys studies his face in the torchlight, searching for deception and finding none. "You would truly share power? Not take it for yourself? I would share everything with you," Jon replies, his voice carrying conviction that goes far beyond political necessity. The moment is interrupted by Tyrion's arrival, his face grim with fresh intelligence. "Forgive the intrusion, but there's been a development. Varys has discovered something about Lady Sansa's correspondence." They follow Tyrion to his chambers, where Varys waits with a collection of decoded messages spread across a table. The Master of Whisperers looks uncomfortable, a rare expression for the usually confident spy master. "Lady Sansa has been negotiating with more parties than we realized," Varys explains carefully, "including some who have expressed flexibility regarding Queen Cersei's rule." Daenerys' eyes flash with anger as she reads the implications. She's been playing both sides, keeping her options open in case we lost. "It's good strategy," Jon says quietly, though his voice carries disappointment. "But it complicates everything. The marriage alliance becomes even more important," Tyrion points out. "It sends a message that House Stark and House Targaryen are truly united. No more hedged bets, no more divided loyalties." As the night deepens over Winterfell, the price of victory becomes clear. The defeat of the White Walkers has only revealed the human enemies waiting to strike, while political revelations threaten to tear apart the alliance that made victory possible. In her chambers, Daenerys stands before a mirror, studying her reflection with new eyes. Tomorrow she must choose between pursuing her birthright and protecting the North that has become her home. The girl who dreamed of conquering Westeros with fire and blood must decide if she's willing to share power with the nephew who doesn't want it, but has the stronger claim. Down the hall, Jon stares out his window toward the Godswood, where dragons rest beneath the heart tree. The bastard who became a king must now grapple with being a prince, while the woman he's growing to love possesses both the power to destroy his enemies and the royal blood that makes their relationship politically explosive. The long night is ending, but the Game of Thrones plays on, deadlier than ever in the pale light of dawn. Moat Cailin rises from the marshes of the neck like a broken tooth, its ancient towers crumbling but still proud after thousands of years. The causeway that runs beside it carries the only reliable road between north and south, making the fortress the key to any invasion of the north. Today, it will decide the fate of two queens and the kingdom they both claim. Jon Snow stands atop the fortress's tallest tower, watching Cersei's army deploy across the southern approaches. 50,000 men in gleaming armor, stretch across the landscape, their banners bright against the grey sky. The golden lion of Lannister flies beside the crowned stag of Baratheon, while lesser houses of the Reach and Westerlands add their colours to the martial display. "She's brought everyone," Sir Davos observes, studying the enemy formation through his spyglass. "Every lord who still answers to King's Landing." Daenerys joins them on the parapet, her silver hair flowing in the wind from the marshes. Behind her, Drogon and Rhaegal perch on the fortress walls, their wounds from the siege mostly healed. The dragon's presence transforms the ancient stronghold into something from legend, a castle defended by living fire. "They outnumber us still," Daenerys says, her violet eyes taking in the enemy dispositions. "But they're fighting for gold and titles. We're fighting for survival." Below them, the combined armies of the North prepare for what many know will be the final battle. Unsullied form their bronze ranks beside northern heavy infantry, while Dothraki cavalry masses on the flanks. The alliance forged in fire and ice has become something greater than the sum of its parts. Meanwhile, in the southern camp, Jaime Lannister stands outside his sister's command tent, his golden hand resting on his sword pommel. The Kingslayer has fought in dozens of battles, but none that have torn at his conscience like this one. Through the tent's open flaps, he can hear Cersei planning the assault with cold calculation. "The dragons are the key," she tells her assembled commanders. "Bring them down, and the rest falls apart. I want every scorpion bolt aimed at those beasts." Jaime thinks of Daenerys Targaryen, the young queen who chose to defend the North rather than simply conquer it. He remembers stories from the siege of Winterfell, how she lost a dragon, saving people she'd never met. The woman Cersei describes as a mad tyrant sounds nothing like the reports from his own scouts. "Something troubles you, brother?" Cersei emerges from her tent, dressed in armor that gleams like burnished gold. She's beautiful still, but there's something cold in her green eyes that wasn't there in their youth. "Just tactical considerations," Jaime lies smoothly. "The dragons give them significant advantages." "Dragons can be killed," Cersei replies with certainty. Aegon proved that during the conquest. If one Targaryen could do it, so can another. The battle begins at dawn with a thunder of hooves and steel. Cersei's cavalry charges across the causeway, their war cries echoing off the ancient stones of Moat Cailin. But the narrow approach works against them, funneling the attack into corridors of death that the defenders have prepared with deadly efficiency. Grey Worm coordinates the defense from the walls, his bronze spear pointing out targets for the unsullied crossbowmen. Let them come. The marsh will drink their blood. Dothraki archers rain arrows down on the advancing enemy, while northern engineers trigger hidden mechanisms that collapse sections of the causeway into the marsh below. Hundreds of Lannister soldiers disappear into the dark water, their golden armor dragging them down like anchors. But Cersei's forces adapt quickly. Siege towers roll forward, protected by overlapping shields and scorpion ballistae that send massive bolts toward the fortress walls. The battle settles into a grinding assault that tests the resolve of both sides. Then the dragons rise. Drogon and Rhaegal launch themselves from Moat Cailin's towers with roars that shake the marshland. Their wings beat thunder as they soar over the battlefield, casting shadows that make enemy soldiers look skyward in terror. Dragonfire pours down like liquid sunlight, turning siege engines to ash and scattering formations like leaves in a storm. "Now!" Jon commands from the walls, and Winterfell's defenders pour out of the fortress in a coordinated counterattack. The battle's tide turns in moments. Cersei's army, magnificent in formation, becomes a mob of panicked men trying to escape dragonfire. But Cersei herself is nowhere to be seen among the fleeing soldiers. She's vanished from the battlefield as completely as morning mist. Meanwhile, in the ruins of an abandoned watchtower 3 miles south of the battlefield, Tyrion Lannister finds his sister waiting with a small guard of loyal knights. She sits on a makeshift throne, constructed from campaign furniture, her golden crown still perfect despite the chaos around them. "Hello, Tyrion," Cersei says calmly, as if they're meeting for dinner instead of after a devastating military defeat. "I wondered when you'd find me." Tyrion limps into the ruined chamber, his mismatched eyes taking in the scene. "It's over, Cersei. Your army is broken. Your allies are dead or fled. Surrender now, and Daenerys might show mercy." Cersei laughs, the sound bitter as winter wine. "Mercy? From a Targaryen? You always were naive, little brother." "She's not our father," Tyrion insists, moving closer to his sister's improvised throne. "She's proven that a dozen times over. She could have burned King's Landing to ash, but she chose to fight the dead instead. She could have conquered the North, but she chose to liberate it." "Pretty words," Cersei replies, her green eyes glittering with malice. "But I have one more card to play." She gestures to a hidden alcove where barrels marked with the alchemist's symbol sit like sleeping death. Wildfire, enough to level what remains of Moat Cailin and everyone within it. "If I can't have the throne," Cersei declares, her voice carrying the finality of absolute conviction, "then no one can." But before she can signal her guards to ignite the volatile substance, a whisper of steel cuts through the tension. One of her loyal knights crumples to the ground, a throwing knife buried in his throat. The others spin toward the threat, but death has already moved among them. Arya Stark emerges from the shadows like a ghost made flesh, needle in one hand and a Valyrian steel dagger in the other. The young woman's grey eyes show no emotion as she steps over the bodies of Cersei's guards. "The many-faced god sends his regards," Arya says quietly, her voice carrying the finality of a funeral bell. Cersei scrambles backward, her composure finally cracking. "You little monster! Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "Preventing a massacre," Arya replies, kicking one of the wildfire barrels to show its contents. "Your trap failed, Your Grace. Time to face justice." Tyrion watches his sister's final moments with a mixture of sadness and relief. Cersei Lannister, who once held the Iron Throne through cunning and cruelty, reduced to a cornered animal in a ruined tower. "Please," Cersei whispers, looking at Tyrion with something that might be genuine fear. "I'm your sister. Your blood." Tyrion considers her words, remembering the golden-haired girl who once protected him from their father's worst rages. But he also remembers the queen who burned the sept of Baelor, who armed religious fanatics, who would have murdered thousands more to keep power. "Yes," he says finally, "you are my sister, and that's why this hurts." He nods to Arya, who moves with the speed of a striking snake. Cersei's scream cuts off abruptly, leaving only silence in the ruined chamber. On the battlefield, Jaime Lannister throws down his sword as the last of Cersei's army surrenders. The Kingslayer kneels in the mud before Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, his golden armor stained with battle. "Your Grace," he addresses both of them, though his eyes remain fixed on the ground. "I yield myself to your mercy." Jon exchanges a glance with Daenerys before speaking. "Ser Jaime, you fought honorably today, even against your own sister's army. That counts for something." "I fought for duty," Jaime replies quietly. "But I know the difference between duty and honor now. Daenerys Targaryen, you have my sword, if you'll accept it." Daenerys studies the man who once served as her father's Kingsguard, who killed that same father to save King's Landing from wildfire. "Rise, Ser Jaime. The realm needs good men, regardless of their past." As the sun sets over the marshes of the Neck, the war for the Iron Throne effectively ends. Cersei's death removes the last organized resistance to Daenerys' claim, while her armies surrender, brings the military strength of the Reach and Westerlands under the dragon banners. But victory tastes bitter for those who remember the cost. Thousands lie dead in the marshes around Moat Cailin, their blood feeding the dark waters. Among them are men who fought only because their lords commanded it, leaving families who will never see them return. "Is this what conquest looks like?" Daenerys asks Jon as they survey the battlefield from the fortress walls. "No," Jon replies, his hand finding hers. "This is what liberation looks like. Messy, painful, but necessary." In the distance, ravens take flight from Moat Cailin, carrying news of Cersei's defeat across the Seven Kingdoms. The Golden Lion has fallen, the crowned stag lies broken, and the dragon's roar echoes from the north to Dorne. But for Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, the hardest work still lies ahead. Winning a war is simpler than building a peace, and the realm they've inherited is broken in ways that Dragonfire cannot heal. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight they stand together on the battlements of victory, fire and ice, united against whatever storms may come. The Game of Thrones has reached its endgame, and a new age is about to begin in Westeros. The Great Hall of Winterfell has never seen a ceremony like the one that unfolds on the first day of spring. Representatives from every corner of Westeros fill the ancient chamber, their banners creating a tapestry of colors beneath the vaulted ceiling. For the first time in 3 centuries, dragons perch outside the windows, their presence transforming tradition into legend. Jon Snow stands beside Daenerys Targaryen before the high table, both wearing crowns that reflect their shared authority. His is forged from northern iron and set with garnets the color of winter blood, while hers gleams with Valyrian steel inlaid with dragon glass that catches the light like captured fire. "Lords and ladies of Westeros," Tyrion Lannister announces, his voice carrying clearly through the crowded hall. "Today we witness not conquest, but covenant. Not the end of kingdoms, but their rebirth in unity." The ceremony begins with ancient words, but the meaning is entirely new. Jon and Daenerys swear oaths not just to rule, but to serve, to protect the realm without destroying its diversity, to unite without conquering, to lead without demanding submission. Do you, Aegon of House Targaryen, called Jon Snow, king in the north, swear to protect the 7 kingdoms while respecting their ancient rights and freedoms? Sir Davos asks, his weathered face solemn with the weight of history. "I do so swear," Jon replies, his voice carrying across the hall to reach every corner. "Do you, Daenerys of House Targaryen, the unburnt, mother of dragons, swear to rule justly and break the chains that bind the innocent?" High Septon's replacement asks, having travelled north, especially for this moment. "I do so swear," Daenerys responds, her violet eyes reflecting the candlelight. Then comes the innovation that will reshape Westeros forever, the joint oath that binds them not just to the realm, but to each other as equal partners in governance. Do you both swear to share power as husband and wife, king and queen, fire and ice united in service to the realm? "We do so swear," they say together, their voices harmonizing in the great hall. Sansa Stark steps forward, carrying a scroll that bears the seals of every major house in Westeros, the new charter of governance that will guide the realm into its next age. The crown recognizes the independence of the North, while binding it in voluntary alliance with the southern kingdoms. She reads, her voice clear and confident. "No kingdom shall be forced to bend the knee, but all shall benefit from mutual protection and trade." The assembled lords murmur approval. This is governance by consent rather than conquest, a revolution disguised as restoration. Lord Tarley of Horn Hill nods alongside Lady Mormont of Bear Island, while Prince Doran's representative from Dorne exchanges pleased glances with the new Lord Paramount of the Reach. The small council shall include representatives chosen by each kingdom, Sansa continues, ensuring all voices are heard in the halls of power. As if summoned by her words, the new council members step forward. Tyrion retains his position as hand to the king, while Sansa assumes the newly created role of hand to the queen. The innovation allows both northern and southern interests to have direct representation at the highest level. Samwell Tarly accepts the position of Grand Maester, his knowledge of both ancient law and practical governance, making him invaluable to the new order. Sir Davos becomes Master of Ships, his honesty and experience perfect for rebuilding trade routes damaged by years of war. But the most surprising appointment comes when Bran rolls his wheelchair forward to accept a position created specifically for him. Master of Knowledge and Mystical Affairs, Daenerys announces, her voice warm with respect. The realm has learned that some threats require wisdom beyond the merely human. Bran Stark will serve as our advisor on matters both historical and supernatural. Bran's strange eyes meet those of the assembled lords, and several shift uncomfortably under his gaze. "I accept," he says simply. "The realm has need of memory, and I remember everything." As the formal ceremonies conclude, attention turns to the more personal announcements that will shape individual lives within the new order. "Arya Stark," Jon calls, and his sister steps forward with the fluid grace of a trained killer. "The realm owes you a debt that can never be repaid. Name your reward." Arya looks around the great hall, taking in the banners and pageantry that represent everything she's never wanted. "I want a ship," she says simply, "and supplies for a long voyage." Daenerys raises an eyebrow in interest. "Where would you sail, Lady Stark?" "West," Arya replies, her grey eyes distant with dreams of discovery. "Beyond the sunset sea, to see what lies at the edge of all the maps." The request surprises many in the hall, but Jon understands his sister perfectly. Arya has never been one for courts and ceremony. She needs adventure, purpose, the freedom to forge her own path. "Granted," Daenerys says without hesitation. "The crown will provide a ship worthy of your courage, and supplies for whatever journey calls to you." Grey Worm steps forward next, his bronze armor polished to mirror brightness. "Your Grace, the Unsullied seek permission to return to Naath. Our war is finished. Missandei's people need protection, and we would give it." "Granted with gratitude," Daenerys replies, emotion thickening her voice. "You have served with honor beyond measure. Go in peace, and know you will always be welcome in Westeros." As the formal business concludes, the great hall slowly empties, leaving only family and closest advisors. Through the windows, they can see Drogon and Rhaegal settling into the expanded dragon shelters that have become permanent fixtures of Winterfell's Godswood. "They like it here," Jon observes, watching the great beasts arrange themselves among the trees. "The cold doesn't bother them as much as we expected." Tyrion approaches with wine for the newly crowned monarchs, his expression thoughtful. "Dragons are fire-made flesh, but perhaps they burn brighter against the ice. The contrast gives them strength." "Like us," Daenerys says, her hand finding Jon's. The simple gesture speaks volumes about their partnership. Political alliance that has become genuine affection. Strategic marriage that has grown into love. Later that evening, as Winterfell celebrates the new order with feasting and song, the key players in this transformation gather privately in the Godswood. The heart tree's red leaves whisper in the spring breeze, while dragon song provides counterpoint to the ancient music of the forest. "It's done," Sansa says, reviewing the final documents that will reshape the governance of Westeros. "The new system is in place. Each kingdom maintains its identity while contributing to the whole." "The hard work starts now," Tyrion observes, settling onto a fallen log with his ever-present wine cup. building institutions, establishing precedents, proving that this new way can work. Bran nods slowly from his wheelchair, his consciousness touching the edges of possible futures. It will work, he says with quiet certainty. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but it will endure. The wheel isn't broken. It's been rebuilt. Arya sharpens needle against a whetstone, the sound rhythmic and soothing. "When do I sail?" she asks Jon. "Whenever you're ready," he replies, "though we'll miss you terribly." "You'll have each other," Arya points out, glancing meaningfully between Jon and Daenerys. "And the realm to rebuild. I'd just be in the way." "Never," Daenerys says firmly. "You've saved us all more times than I can count. But I understand the need to find your own path." As night deepens over Winterfell, the conversation turns to practical matters. Trade agreements, military cooperation, the 1,000 details that will make or break the new system. But underlying it all is a sense of completion, of a story reaching its natural conclusion. The dragons settle into sleep with contented rumbles, their great forms curled around the heart tree like guardian spirits. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight fire and ice rest together in the ancient godswood, their war finally ended. "What do you think history will call this day?" Missandei asks, as she prepares to depart for Naath with Grey Worm. "The beginning," Jon says simply. "Not of an ending, but of something new." In the crypts beneath Winterfell, the stone kings of winter look down on their descendants with carved faces that might almost show approval. The Stark in Winterfell has a dragon queen for a wife, but the North remembers its own while embracing the future. Spring has come to Westeros at last, bringing with it the hope that the long night of war and death might truly be over. Dragons fly above the North, their ancient song mixing with the howl of wolves to create music the realm has never heard before. The wheel of governance turns with new purpose, driven not by conquest, but by consent. The Game of Thrones has ended, but the story of Westeros continues, written now in cooperation rather than conflict, in unity rather than division. And in the godswood of Winterfell, where the old gods watch eternal, fire and ice sleep peacefully together beneath the turning stars. 1 year has passed since the Battle of Winterfell, and the anniversary brings the first celebration of what the small folk have begun calling Dragon Day. Banners of red and black hang alongside grey direwolves throughout the north, while bonfires burn on every hill to commemorate the night fire, and ice stood together against the darkness. Jon Snow stands on Winterfell's battlements, watching the festivities spread across the castle grounds below. Children who have never known the terror of White Walkers play games involving wooden dragons and toy swords, while their parents share stories of the great battle that ended the long night forever. "You're brooding again," Daenerys says, joining him at the parapet. Her condition shows clearly now. 7 months with child, their first son or daughter growing strong within her. The sight of her fills Jon with wonder every time. This silver-haired queen who chose love over conquest, who carries the future of both their bloodlines. Not brooding, Jon corrects with a slight smile. Remembering, thinking about how much has changed. Below them, the celebration continues with a warmth that would have seemed impossible during the dark days of the siege. Dothraki warriors teach northern children how to braid their hair for battle, while former Unsullied who chose to remain in Westeros demonstrate spear techniques alongside master-at-arms from a dozen different houses. Most surprising of all, Jaime Lannister moves among the crowds with easy confidence, his golden hand replaced by a practical iron one that serves him better in his new role. The former Kingslayer has found purpose in rebuilding what war destroyed, overseeing the reconstruction of keeps and castles across the 7 kingdoms. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Tyrion observes, approaching with his ever-present wine cup and a collection of ravens' messages from across the realm. Trade routes are thriving, The kingdoms are cooperating instead of scheming against each other, and nobody's tried to assassinate either of you in months." "A resounding success," Daenerys laughs, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly. "Though I think the baby might disagree with all this standing around." Jon immediately offers his arm for support, his concern evident, despite her protests that she's perfectly capable. The tenderness between them has grown deeper with each passing month, political alliance transformed into something far more precious. "The Ravens bring good news," Tyrion continues, scanning the latest reports. "Harvest yields are up across the Reach. The Riverlands report no banditry for the first time in decades, and King's Landing is actually growing instead of burning for once." Sansa approaches across the battlements, her pace quick despite the formal robes of her office, as hand to the Queen. "More good news," she announces, holding up a message bearing the seal of the Iron Bank. "They've agreed to the infrastructure loans for the northern roads. We'll have proper highways connecting every major keep before the next winter." The conversation is interrupted by a commotion from the Godswood below. Drogon and Rhaegal have emerged from their nests beneath the heart tree, stretching wings that cast shadows across half the castle. The dragons have grown even larger in the year since the battle, their presence now as much a part of Winterfell as the ancient walls themselves. "They're restless today," Daenerys observes, watching her children prowl around the weirwood with unusual energy. Something has them excited. Bran appears in the courtyard below, his wheelchair rolling smoothly across stones, worn smooth by centuries of Stark feet. The young man who serves as Master of Knowledge raises one hand toward the dragons, and they settle immediately, recognizing the touch of the three-eyed raven's power. "He's gotten stronger," Jon observes. "His connection to the old magic, I mean. Sometimes I think he knows things before they happen." "He does," Daenerys replies simply. "Just this morning he told me to prepare for joyous news arriving with the sunset. I assumed he meant the trade agreements. But now—" She's interrupted by her own sharp intake of breath, one hand pressing against her side as their child moves restlessly within her. Jon's concern is immediate and obvious, but she waves him off with a reassuring smile. "Just active today," she explains. "Like the dragons. Perhaps they sense something in the air." As if summoned by her words, Maester Vulcan appears in the doorway to the battlements, his face bright with excitement, despite his usually careful demeanor. Your Grace," he addresses both monarchs formally, though his joy makes the titles seem almost musical. News from the Wall. The Watchers report that the lands beyond have begun to bloom. Green things grow where only ice existed for millennia. The Night King's power is broken completely. The very landscape is healing. The announcement sends ripples of wonder through the small group. Even Tyrion sets down his wine cup, understanding the magnitude of what this means. The White Walker threat isn't just defeated. It's been unmade, reversed, healed at the deepest level. "How is that possible?" Sansa asks, her practical mind immediately seeking explanations. Bran's voice carries from the courtyard below, though he shouldn't be able to hear their conversation at this distance. "Fire and ice, united. The old magic recognizes the new balance. The wheel turns toward life instead of death." Jon and Daenerys exchange a look of wonder. Their union has accomplished something beyond mere political alliance or personal happiness. It has helped heal the very wounds in the world itself. The celebration below takes on new meaning as news of the healing spreads. Musicians strike up songs that mix northern ballads with Essosi melodies, creating music that has never been heard before. Children born after the battle dance with their parents, while veterans of the siege share increasingly embellished stories of dragons breathing fire to save the world. As evening approaches, the family gathers in the great hall for a private feast. The high table holds familiar faces, Tyrion with his quick wit and quicker wine cup, Sansa managing details even during celebration, Bran offering cryptic observations that somehow always prove wise. Even Samwell has travelled from King's Landing for the anniversary, bringing news of the great library being built to preserve knowledge from across the known world. His wife Gilly sits beside him, their children playing with wooden dragons while the adults discuss the future. To absent friends, Jon raises his cup, and the toast echoes through the hall. They drink to Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon, to all who died in the wars that led to this peace. But the sadness is tinged with hope. Their sacrifices haven't been wasted. And to those still exploring, Daenerys adds, thinking of Arya somewhere beyond the Sunset Sea. Ravens from her ship arrive irregularly, carrying tales of islands and peoples never before encountered by Westerosi eyes. The feast continues long into the night, but Jon and Daenerys slip away to the God's Wood as the moon rises full and bright. The heart tree's red leaves whisper in the gentle breeze, while Drogon and Rhaegal curl around its base like great guardian cats. "Do you think she knows?" Daenerys asks suddenly, her voice soft with wonder. "She?" Jon queries, though something in her tone suggests he already understands. "Our daughter," Daenerys explains, both hands now resting on her belly. "I can feel her responding to the dragon's songs. She knows their voices already." Jon kneels beside her in the soft grass, placing his hand over hers to feel their child's movement. The baby responds to his touch with a strong kick that makes them both laugh. "She'll grow up with dragons," Jon marvels. "They'll be as natural to her as horses or hounds. She'll never know a world where ice and fire were enemies." "What should we call her?" Daenerys asks. "A name that honors both our houses, both our histories." Jon considers this, thinking of all the strong women who have shaped their lives. "Lyanna," he suggests quietly. "For my mother. But with a Targaryen middle name. Lyanna Rhaenys, perhaps?" "Perfect," Daenerys agrees, tears of joy glistening in her violet eyes. "Lyanna Rhaenys Targaryen. A name that bridges winter and summer, north and south." As they sit together beneath the heart tree, the dragons begin to sing, a low, harmonious thrumming that seems to resonate through the very stones of Winterfell. The ancient castle has become something new, a place where old gods and new coexist, where dragons roost beside direwolves, where the future grows from the roots of the past. "I love you," Jon says simply, the words carrying all the weight of everything they've built together. "And I love you," Daenerys replies, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. Fire and ice, forever united. Above them, the aurora dances across the northern sky in sheets of green and gold, as if the old gods themselves are celebrating this moment of perfect peace. Spring has truly come to Westeros, bringing with it the promise that the long night of war and death is finally over. In the distance, wolves howl their ancient song, while dragons answer with harmonies never before heard in this world. The wheel has turned full circle, but instead of crushing those beneath it, it lifts them toward a future bright with hope. The baby stirs within Daenerys, as if eager to join this new world where love has conquered hate, where cooperation has replaced conquest, where the next generation will know only the warmth of spring and the songs of dragons flying free over lands at peace. The story of ice and fire has reached its perfect conclusion, but the tale of their daughter and the world she will inherit has only just begun. April 22nd, 2026, 12:20:46. Glob. Pattern. /projects/Game of Thrones. Whatif/**.md. April 22nd, 2026, 12:20:49. Bash. Command. Find .dash name. ****md. ***type f pipe. Head -20. Description. Find markdown files that might contain reference guides. April 22nd, 2026, 12:20:52. Bash. Command. ls-la. Description. List files and directories in current working directory. April 22nd, 2026-12-2056. Read file_path. C:/users/shadow /desktop /compiled binaries /Claude code generation 4 2 /output files /Game of Thrones what if 2 hours 12 characters // video number 28 script JMK // project guide Game of Thrones what if v1.json April 22nd 2026 12:21:03 tool search query select web search max results 1 April 22nd 2026 12:21:13 web search query Daenerys Targaryen arrives Dragonstone timeline Game of Thrones season 7 when canon April 22nd 2026 12:21:24 web search query Game of Thrones Jon Snow King North Winterfell season 7 timeline Daenerys arrival April 22nd 2026 12:21:36 web search query and Game of Thrones character ages timeline year 300 AC Robert's Rebellion Daenerys born when April 22nd 2026 12:21:49 web search query Game of Thrones Winterfell last 300 Esau North houses Stark children ages Rob Jon Sansa Arya Bran April 22nd 2026 12:23:15 right file_path C:/users /shadow /desktop /compiled binaries /Claude code a generation via 2 /output files /Game of Thrones what if 2 hours at 12 characters // video number 28 script JMK // outline.md content what if Daenerys Targaryen landed in the north instead of Dragonstone divergence point 300 AC instead of April 22nd 2026 12:24:47 right file_path C:/users /shadow /desktop /compiled binaries /Claude code generation 5 2 /output files /Game of Thrones what if 2 hours 12 chapters / video number 28 script JMK chapter 1 .txt content what if Daenerys Targaryen landed in the north instead of Dragonstone let's explore the depths of it in the Vide April 22nd 2026 12:26:25 right file_path C:/users /shadow /desktop /compiled binaries /Claude code generation 5 2 /output files /Game of Thrones what if 2 hours 12 characters / video number 28 script JMK chapter 2 .txt content the great hall of Winterfell echoes with heated voices as northern lords debate the impossible Jon Snow sits in April 22nd 2026 12:28:07 right file_path C:/users /shadow /desktop /compiled binaries /Claude code generation vi 2 /output files /Game of Thrones what if 2 hours 12 chapters video number 28 script JMK chapter 3 .txt content the ancient godswood of Winterfell has never seen anything like the construction that begins at dawn. Northern CA, April 22nd, 2026, 12:30:01. Right, file_path, C:/users /shadow /desktop /compiled binaries /Claude code generation 5 output files, Game of Thrones, what if, 2 hours, 12 characters, video number 28, script JMK, chapter 4, .txt, content. The Raven arrives at Winterfell just after dawn, its black wings heavy with ice from the long flight south. Meist, April 22nd, 2026, 12:31:59. Right, file_path, users shadow desktop compiled binaries Claude code generation 5 2 output files Game of Thrones, what if, 2 hours, 12 chapters video number 28, script JMK chapter 5 .txt, content. The Raven from King's Landing arrives 3 days after the battle at Last Hearth, its message bearing the Royal S, April 22nd, 2026, 12:33:59. Right, file_path, users shadow desktop compiled binaries Claude code generation 5 2 output files Game of Thrones, what if 2 hours 12 characters video number 28, script JMK chapter 6 .txt, content. The attack comes at dawn, not from one direction, but from a dozen. Ravens arrive at Winterfell in a black cloud, April 22nd, 2026, 12:35:47. Right, file_path, users shadow desktop compiled binaries Claude code generation 5 2 output files Game of Thrones, what if 2 hours 12 characters video number 28, script JMK chapter 7.txt, content. The army of the dead appears on the horizon at dusk, a black tide flowing across the white landscape like spilled, April 22nd, 2026, 12:37:58. Right, file_path, users shadow desktop compiled binaries Claude code generation 5 2 output files Game of Thrones, what if, 2 hours 12 chapters video number 28, script JMK chapter 8.txt, content. Dawn breaks grey and cold over Winterfell as Jon Snow stands in the God's Wood, his hand resting on Rhaegal's bronze, April 22nd, 2026, 12:39:53. Right, file_path, users shadow desktop compiled binaries Claude code generation 5 2 output files Game of Thrones, what if 2 hours 12 characters video number 28, script JMK chapter 9.txt, content. The Raven from King's Landing arrives just as Winterfell begins to heal from the siege. Maester Wolkan delivers April 22nd, 2026, 12:41:49. Right, file path, users, shadows, desktops, compiled binaries Claude code generation, Vid2 output fields toward Game of Thrones, what if, 2 hours, 12 characters, video 28, script JMK chapter 10.txt, content. Moat Cailin rises from the marshes of the neck like a broken tooth, its ancient towers crumbling but still proud, April 22nd, 2026, 12:43:37. Right, file path, users shadows, desktop jostles, compiled binaries Claude code, generation Vid2 output files, Game of Thrones, what if, 2 hours, 12 characters, video to 28 script. JMK, Chapter 11, .txt, content. The Great Hall of Winterfell has never seen a ceremony like the one that unfolds on the first day of spring. Rep, April 22nd, 2026, 12:45:28. Right, file_path, /users /shadow /desktop /compiled binaries /Claude code. Generation 5, 2 /output files /Game of Thrones, what if, 2 hours, 12 chapters // video number 28, script JMK / chapter 12 .txt, content. 1 year has passed since the Battle of Winterfell, and the anniversary brings the first celebration of what the April 22nd, 2026, 12:46 and 12 seconds. Bash, command, /lastar, .txt pipegrep. Chapter. Description. List all chapter.toxt files to verify they exist.